Okay, boys and girls, we're live with the weather report, and we have Scott. And we were just chatting back room about Alcoholics Anonymous. Were you talking about there was a guy that wrote a book, and of course I forgot his name too. It was, do you remember who the guy is that wrote the little book on AA?
No, the titles escape me. I always hate bringing up a subject ad hoc because, I won't remember the names until after the conversation's over.
I know. I hate that.
Nobody wants a phone call in the middle of the night of me remembering something.
Yeah, but anyway, I've talked to him quite a bit, and I bought his book, and I heard his criticisms of AA, and then he's trying to promote that other that other organization, and of course I forgot their name too. Today is not going to be the day to remember any fucking names for anything.
Yeah, it's just kind of general concepts. This is a general concepts half hour.
Right. So anyway, there are other forms of recovery, besides AA, and there's been a whole bunch of bullshit printed about AA success rates. And all of those things came from a study that AA did itself back in, I don't know, like 20 years ago. And what they did is they had, for one thing, you don't come into a fucking AA group and ask people for statistics, or you don't question them or anything like that, because alcoholics in AA are kind of the kind of people that would show you out of the room if you try to do this shit. It's called Alcoholics Anonymous, and we have closed meetings, and we don't really want we don't want people analyzing us. We don't want anybody knowing our fucking business. We don't want anybody telling us what to do. Right. So most alcoholics, that recovered or not recovered, are going to have the attitude, fuck you, I'll punch you in the mouth. It's just like, so anyway, but AA managed to get enough people to participate voluntarily to do a study. And what they did is they tried to figure out of all the people that walk in AA cold, how many recover right away and never drink again. And the number they came up with startled me. I thought it was extremely high, and that was 5%. That 5% of the people that go to, just walk in AA and they sober up. And I have friends that did that. And I've always looked at them suspiciously. And then they found out that after something like 5 years, 70% of the people that walked into that meeting the first time had some extended period of recovery, like a year or two, that sort of thing, in their lives, right? And so the fucking idiot psychologists and doctors took that information, and they started misreading all the statistics and misusing it. And then they did some studies of their own, where they took people who were court ordered into AA, or people that were in treatment, were in psych wards, and they tracked them, and they found this 5% of them recovered. And so they came up with this stupid statistic, and 5% is the recovery rate if you don't get any help at all. I mean, you just spontaneously 5% of people that have problems in AA will sober up, right? So there became this whole, and then the statistics that AA did and the statistics that other people did were misused and misrepresented entirely.
Well, people are always going to misuse statistics, that's for sure.
Right, but here's the
5% number. They just walk in, they get involved in the group for at least a year, and they're recovered from their alcoholism. And are the same people, that same 5%, have they been tracked over longitudinal studies, like after 5, after 10, after 20 years?
I think they did 5 years, but here's the thing. Fucking alcoholism is so misunderstood, and it's like no one that is an alcoholic or a drug addict is going to remain static or just miraculously recover from their disease and be cured.
Right.
And that's the whole point. You're never cured. You're always going to have these ups and downs and ins and outs. And for a lot of us, for 5% of us apparently that keep going to meetings, or 5% of us that are just lucky, they managed to sober up for their entire lives, or for over 5 years, right? But
like those annoying people who lose weight and never gain it back again.
Right. But that isn't what this shit is about. It's not a fucking game for us, okay? it's not, oh, I'm going to sober up and be miraculously cured. I'm going to be like some statistic for you. No,
Yeah.
I'm a human being with a life. I'm going to have ups and downs, and I have had ins and outs. I got introduced to AA in 1974. I started drinking at 12. And by 1974, I was such a total wreck. And I ended up in a psych ward. Okay, as a result
Yeah.
of suicide attempts and things like that. I got introduced to AA, and I sobered up for 35 days. 5 days after I got out of treatment, I had a problem with a girl, my first wife.
Oh, them dames.
Yeah, and then I ended up drinking, and then I went back, and I was sober. Like I was sober for 30 days, and then I'd slip, and then after a while, I was sober for like 6 months. And then in about 1980, I moved down here to the Twin Cities off of my local environment. And I managed to sober up for, I think it was a year solid. We had about 6 months of screwing around with drugs. And then, and my sons were born. And then I sobered up for until 1988. I started using ephedrine, not drinking, but using ephedrine for about 6 months. So there was another slip, right?
So
And
what
then,
is ephedrine just kind of be?
Yeah,
Because when you say ephedrine, I think of pseudoephedrine, which is like,
yeah, that's what it was, Sudafed.
oh, you got addicted or overused Sudafed?
Well, it was the
Oh, you
other.
got it into meth.
It was the other enantiomer, the one. No, it was definitely ephedrine. It was the stuff
Oh,
you
okay.
bought over the counter. The stuff they sold truckers. Okay, so I had another little debit, but I was sober for like out of that 10 years, I was sober maybe 95% of that time, right? And then I got drunk one night in 1990. I got drunk for 2 nights in 1994. 1998 to 1999, right before the turn of the century, I was all fucked up for about 2 years. And that was when my kids were 17 years old, 17 and 18. And then, let's see, I sobered up again for a year. And then I went down in about 2002. And in 2007, I sobered up and I haven't drank or used a drug since. So, I mean, you add that up, right? And you look at it, you turn that into a fucking statistic.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody turned me into a statistic and said, "Oh, I wasn't successful until 2007,"
Yeah,
I would kind of punch them in the mouth because I
there's a lot
spent
of
a lot.
nuance in there.
I spent a lot of fucking sober years. Raised my kids till they were 13 before they ever saw me using or drunk. And
during that time you raised your kids, did you continue to go to meetings and stuff?
off and on. The thing is, I would go to meetings for 3 years, and then I would, my life would just start to rock on ahead and soar. In every respect, financially, happiness, everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go on, and then eventually, I would kind of lose the thread. And I quit going to meetings because I was doing so well without meetings. I don't need no stinking AA.
Yeah.
And after. And that was fine sometimes for like 5 years. And then all of a sudden, it's like, hey, why don't I go and buy a 6-pack? Or why don't I go and buy some ephedrine or, whatever. And then I would be off down the fucking rabbit hole again.
Yeah.
And this time I've gone to meetings I missed a few weeks, but every week I go to one meeting or more. And when I first sobered up, I went to 90 meetings in 90 days, which was my treatment. Basically, I just went to AA. And so it's extremely misunderstood. And the thing is that AA did not sober me up. I didn't exactly sober myself up, but the combination of the two things working together allowed me to change my life completely.
Yeah, it just seems like anything that will give you a group of supportive people who encourage you and challenge you, and B, just that continual self-awareness.
Well, the thing is, they give you these 12 steps, and it's a structure, and it has it's very similar. Like when I first ran into it when I was 24 years old, I recognized immediately that it was very much like the practice in Buddhism of basically working toward peace and nirvana, that sort of thing, right? The 12 steps were almost identical, and it was like, holy shit, this is this is a Buddhist program to me, and that's what I thought of it was. And but it gives me this structure in my life. And what I realized in 2007 that helped me sober up between 2007 and 2009, when I mean, I was sober, but it took me 2 years to wake up and kind of figure out what's going on. I figured out my biggest problem was consistency, that I could not make a New Year's resolution and stick to it, right?
Yeah.
So I made the decision that no matter what, I don't give a fuck about anything else in my life. The one thing I'm going to do right is I'm going to go to meetings until I die.
Well, that's a great goal.
Yeah, and the fact that I do go to a meeting every week reminds me, and it sort of gives me the power and the energy to stay sober for another week. And I just went through some very, very dark times in the last 2 months, and I thought about drinking, and I thought how nice it would be to just get fucking loaded out of my mind. But I rolled right through that, and I was impressed, that I didn't get drunk.
Sometimes we surprise ourselves.
Yeah. But I mean, all this bullshit about trying to turn addicts into a statistic, and this narrative that they should go get this treatment and then all of a sudden they're going to be better for the rest of their lives. Nobody's life is like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had 2 marriages. I've had fucking events in my life that just go over. Yeah. I mean, so many ups and downs in my life. How I am not the same person that I was back when I was 24 or 30 or 40 or 50. You change constantly. So AA is a tool that anybody can use, and it's there. And if you use it properly and you understand that it is a tool to deal with the cowboy in your life, the cowboy in your head, you will put together a life with more sobriety than failure, which is what I've done. I think I've spent 70 or 80% of my life sober, and basically adhering to those principles. And the other 20% is an absolute fucking disaster. So, so anyway, but and there are other methods out there, but you got to find something, and you better find something that has a fire hydrant on every block like AA does.
Yeah.
The neat thing about AA is that if I get a contract to go out to Columbus and work for JP Morgan, I can call ahead and I can find a meeting every single day, 20 meetings a day in any city almost in the entire world.
Yeah.
And I can land on a safe ground, and I can say, okay, I'm going to stick to this one program. I'm going to do this one consistent thing. So anybody listening, I hope you understand that this bullshit that the medical community is searching for, this cure for alcoholism, is just that. The dialogue that has to be had is the dialogue with real alcoholics and addicts. And you have to look at entire lives, and you have to look at entire lives as very complex things, not something you're just going to go and throw a fucking method at and come up with.
And if you need therapy, get therapy. If you need some sort of medicine or whatever, then try that. Just whatever it takes to keep
whatever
away from that thing that's destroying your life.
And it's a personal thing for every alcoholic and addict. They're kind of left to decide, what is it that you need and what is it that you want out of your life. And we, I try to help other drunks and addicts get into it's like you get into a groove, and when you're in the groove, you're okay. But boy, you can be bounced out of the groove real easy by a little spot of dust, kick you out of the groove. That's really. So what the fuck? Damage control Dan forced into early retirement. So what did I'm reading the chat.
Yeah, I'm looking at that and just responding to it with a bit of apathy and
yes.
Sort of like when I go onto those old UHF stations and they have those eternal commercials on Sundays where they're trying to sell you something. That's what the vibe I'm getting off of it.
Oh, it's Standing for Truth on his channel has a playlist for Dan, because talk about damage control, Stanley. Dan has really gotten under your skin, hasn't he? I mean, he
Apparently.
really, so is Erica.
Oh,
You
Erica's great. Don't go knocking Erica. Dan is too. I mean, gosh, to have access to people of their intellectual caliber is such a privilege.
Yeah.
And then and of course we have Dimiter.
Yep.
Who comes on. In fact, he's coming on in just a few minutes, isn't he?
He is coming on in a few minutes. We're waiting for Otangelo. And we are going to be very respectful of Otangelo today.
Yeah, I'm just going to set it on mute and maybe take notes if I feel like I'm about to burst out and say something.
Yeah, and I did mention that Standing for Truth, Otangelo, Cel Cordova, they at least put out content that keep us running, and reading and learning and stuff like that. So that is kind of they're sort of a cut above the Kent Hovens of the world, So we appreciate that.
Yeah, they make their opinions well known in public.
Yeah, but as far as
Dimiter,
hi guys.
As far as Standing for Truth, he highly doubts that David and Dan are going to embarrass Jensen. Jensen is a snake oil salesman he's paid to fudge data, and he fudges data so badly.
Did you know that he went to Harvard?
Yeah, and
I was surprised. Why are they keeping that a secret? You would think that they would talk about that.
Oh, they do. Well, oh yeah. Okay, you make a little joke, right? Okay.
My tongue is in my cheek. Yes.
There's a lot of people that went to Harvard that are just wonderful at marketing and selling you shit you don't need and making stuff up. And I'm sure he learned a lot of tricks at Harvard about lying, which is pretty much what he does. He's a liar for Jesus, and if you start looking into his work, there's no real work there at all.
Yeah, why don't whichever organization he's employed by, why don't they fund research, for him? Why isn't he in a lab
publishing? Yeah, and doing lab work, right?
Testing the hypotheses that he claims need to be tested. He's basically, from what I've heard him say on different interviews and videos, he wants the broader, more secular scientific community to test it for him. I just don't get it.
Yeah, his lab is an Excel spreadsheet, and he goes out and collects all this information, and then he tweaks the data and he creates his own graph so that he has these things that look like people jumping off the ark and all this garbage, and it really is garbage research. And when you try to press him and get his information, like I sent him a couple emails and he sent me part of it, but he didn't send me the part I want. You remember last week I asked Cel Cordova to send me a spreadsheet. Cel did the same thing. He refused to send it because they don't want you to see how simplistic their math is.
Yeah,
the stuff that they're doing is. And when Cel finally did a video showing me the formula, I did that whole thing in 5 lines of Python.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous how little coding went into what he was doing, and I have yet to look into all of the nuances of what he was trying to present because log graphs you have to get my mind around them, and I can't quite get my mind around what he's doing. But what I think he's doing is a bunch of tomfoolery, and I have to spend some time to analyze it and look at the data, and of course it's going to take me days to look at his 5-line program, right, and figure out whether or not he's got something. And but that's what we do. So I'm trying to get back to that, and I really want to do it. So, but anyway, I have this vertebrate paleontology book in both electronic version and in hard copy. I've had the hard copy version for a while. I just got the electronic version of it, and it's a pretty cool book. A lot of black and white photos.
Mm-hmm.
and basically Amphioxus cephalochordata is the extant version of what we think was a very early version of a vertebrate. Yeah, you got to be careful with that though, because this thing still exists today, right? So this thing also has evolved for 700 million years, and so we try to project back to what early chordates looked like and how the whole field of vertebrates got started. And there are some pretty and I was thinking it might be good to go through some of these diagrams and some of this book. I'm trying to find they got some. Oh, this is kind of cool. Rotting bias, when an organism dies. I haven't read this yet.
I've never heard of that concept.
When an organism dies, its carcass decays and its information is lost. Until recently, such loss of information was assumed to be random, but taphonomic experiments on modern Amphioxus and lampreys show that the first tissue to rot away take with them key diagnostic characters. In fact, through the process of decay over weeks, tissues are lost in such a way that specimens become more and more primitive in appearance. That's interesting.
That is, yeah, never thought of it that way.
Rotting bias. So anyway, they're getting information out of how things decay, I think is what his point is.
I was watching, I don't know what makes me think of this, but I was watching this YouTube channel by Caitlin Doty. I forget the name of it, but it's basically about death, because she's like a green mortician.
Oh, cool.
And so she said her dying wish is to be fed to animals in the wild. And so she featured this guy that will take the cremated remains of people and mix them with basically feed for wildlife. It's like a mixture of molasses and grains and things like that. And they mix the cremated ashes, which is just like calcium, phosphorus, and certain calcium-based salts, and then just mix it with that, make a block out of it, and then feed it to the deer, the raccoon, the wolves, who might be out in the forest.
Yeah,
I thought that was very interesting. So, do you think I need to exit the stream so we don't scare off Otangelo?
I don't know. We're waiting for him to show up. Has he gotten back to you, Dimiter?
No.
Okay. Are you mad at me?
Who?
Me. Are you mad at me?
To be mad at you? Why?
Because I scared Otangelo off last night.
Oh boy.
Well, I did. He told me not to do the Benny Hill music anymore. And last night, I get the devil in me every now and then, and I can't resist. When he came into the chat, I did it, and I thought I could get away with it one more time without pissing him off too badly, but I don't know if I'm right about that.
Oh, Benny Hill is my favorite. I like it.
I know.
And he's I'm usually using highly recommend is a Benny Hill therapy.
Yeah. Benny Hill, yeah.
And he's very good. I mean, I like him a lot, and I'm watching his videos frequently not very frequent, but from time to time when I kind of feel. Also, I'm obsessed with another show in the 70s and 80s. It's a Carol Burnett show.
Oh yeah.
That is amazing show.
Yeah.
I like it. I mean, I so much. I'm almost every other day. I'm just watching one small episode of this Carol Burnett show.
You're watching those pared down episodes that are like 30 minutes or so.
I mean, there's a different variations. Yeah. I mean, sometimes just a small sketch episode. I love it. I mean, especially when she pretended to be the queen.
Mhm.
She's so good at that. I mean, it's amazing. So, I mean, that's the best therapy to laugh and to sometimes to laugh at yourself. It's also just even better. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah,
to
watching
laugh,
Carol Burnett used to be the highlight of the week, especially like when we'd go to my grandparents. Like
yeah,
everybody in the family would be around the TV. We'd watch MASH, and then later on Carol Burnett in the same evening. Just so many good memories.
yeah. Carol Burnett is amazing woman. I mean, she's still alive. I don't know. Is she still alive? Uh, I know that actually her life it's not very easy. I mean, she started with a very poor family of even kind of family problems with a drunken kind of parents, and her life was obviously very difficult to start with. Also, for some reason, she lost her daughter, Carol Burnett,
Yeah. Yeah.
and she still was going on too. Also, I know that she was involved in a process that her daughter needed to quit drugs addiction.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, this woman, although it's so amazing to watch it, and she went through very much lots of difficulties. How not to respect such a person? I mean,
Yeah.
this is amazing. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So standing
yeah,
for
I
truth.
don't know.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know why Otangelo is feel kind of pissed off from that. I mean, oh come on, man.
Yeah, we were
Uh,
poking fun at him, but
I don't want to mention even that he actually very frequently, from time to time, he allowed himself to actually accuse other people and trying to put the name on them or something. But that's kind of, you know, it depends on the ethics. So
yeah, he didn't have any problem hanging around with Smokey Saint when Smokey Saint and everybody was calling me Speed of Pudding and making fun of me and calling me names, and they didn't mind having a little laugh on me, you know.
mhm.
So I'm kind of surprised that when the tables turn and we poke a little fun at them, that all of a sudden they're all butthurt about it. It's like, I mean, we do this. I mean, we're obviously in these two. We have set up these two warring camps in this imaginary universe that is a YouTube, right? And we poke fun at each other. But I mean, if if it came to having to pull one of them out of you know, to save one of them from drowning or protect one of them in any way, or to do anything human with these people, we would step right up and forget all about this YouTube bullshit and this war, right? And we would treat each other as human beings. And it's, so I mean, we've got this whole, war going on, right? And we want to keep it lighthearted, I think. And I think I do. I mean, I didn't to a
Yeah,
point. I'm
yes,
kind of getting to the point where, every now and then I'll call them idiots because God, it's like beating a dead horse. I mean, really. Okay, so Standing for Truth is going on about Dr. Dan. He's got these. Oh, what happened to Scott? He got the same problem. Basically, he can't. He just Dr. Dan has gotten so under his skin that now he's calling him a communist. Oh my God, Ramat's here.
what's wrong with the communists?
I know what's wrong with it. Yeah, I mean, oh my God, and Smokey Saint's here. I'm gonna have to start tossing people out. I mean, we're attracting some really interesting people on this channel. All of a sudden, well, David still shit talking, and you wonder why I won't bother with you. Here's a real question: have you ever had an argument of your own? Don't answer that. We all know the answer. Raw Matt writes papers for PLOS Biology. I understand.
Well,
Oh my God. And then Stephanie's right in the middle of it. We got our learning not to be triggered as an art form in its own right. Thank you, Stephanie.
that's true. Yeah.
Yep. Anyway, I wanted to point out this God, with all the shit going on in chat, I don't know what to do today. Well, G-Speed, would you rather have less viewers or maybe just the ones that won't risk making you look so stupid? Hey, Smokey, you know what? I had you tossed out of this channel, and I will do it again. You're the only person I will ever toss out of a channel because I think you're a stinky snake. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you can invite Immutable to come.
Yeah, I think well, Immutable, I don't know what the hell he's doing at this time. That he's probably out talking to his crocodiles or alligators or whatever the hell it is. He stalks alligators in Florida, I think. He's an alligator stalker. You are special, Smokey.
Yeah. It's nice to chase the pythons in Florida because they are kind of overpopulation and it's an invasive species. So chasing pythons in Florida, it's very useful for the nature.
Okay.
So that will be nice.
Yeah, they're causing problems out there.
So my suggestion is, since Otangelo probably won't be here, you can play his, the live chat probably 3 days ago. That was kind of about the genetic code. He was trying to...
Was that on the weather report?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay, so do you know what day it was?
Let's see. I probably can find it. Which was that? And he was talking about arbitrary code. What is the code? And how intelligent is the code? Those kinds of things, which is the usual stuff. Probably we're talking about. Let's see.
What the hell? Ramat had a comment, and no, I can't even. Oh, no, it's still there, standing. Ramat's comment is still there.
Maybe from 15th?
The 15th? Oh, shit.
Oh, no, not from 15th, from 14th.
From the 14th.
14th, okay. Yeah.
So we got the 14th at 4:07 p.m. That might be it. Let me take a look here. It's going to take a little while to figure this out. Let's see. That's an irrelevant question. Is Otangelo spamming? Otangelo Grass. So that's what people behind the scenes. Hello, everyone. Let's see. I'm trying to see whose chat I'm reading. These have funny names. They're not named by the date. Who was talking? Was it you and Otangelo?
I was not there.
Okay. Yeah, this has got to be our chat from the 14th. So
from the 14th. So you just go.
You want me to just look at Otangelo's stuff?
Just go 3 weather reports back.
Okay, do you remember what he was talking about?
Let me see. So just 1 second.
Genesis, which the thing is, I've mentioned this numerous times. The first forms of life,
So let's see.
Is it the 14th?
14th, yeah, the 14th.
Okay, so we had Dessel Drace, we had Otangelo, we had Ian Chen, Immutable Destiny was commenting, Molecular Alchemy, Nestleg, and Otangelo Grosso. So he didn't have too many comments on the 14th. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe about 20 comments. Let's see, he said, you want to see them?
Yeah, that's
okay. Let me do a little work here to. Oh God, my goodness, where's the view? Oh, here we go, 125%. So I want to go to about 200%, and we are looking at Otangelo comments. Okay, Otangelo Grasso. Let me try to share the screen. See if these.
He entered in the life, so he was in the life, and he started to. He started to talk about genetic code, how intelligent is the genetic code, some sort of arbitrary. So,
Can you see that?
Lena is here, so she also have a questions.
Would you kindly ask Dimiter if he agrees with you that the genetic code is not a real code because it is not bijective but subjective? Okay, so.
Yeah, that's interesting point. Subjective versus subjective.
Or no, it's sort of a term from functions where you can go from the codon to the amino acid, but you can't go back again because there's some because if you go back again, it could be any number of different codon sets, and that in order for it to be bijective, like a real function, you would have to be able to go both ways, that sort of thing. And I told her that it is not a real code because of that. Because you can't translate backwards. You can only translate one way. And she's asking if you agree with me on that. So I'm saying no, it's not strictly a code.
So it's there it is. So it is almost true. Whatever you said, it's almost accurate. However, there is a kind of exceptions, meaning. So if you think about you're going from genetic code, so you have a real code, recognition between specific amino acids and specific tRNA, and you produce proteins, right?
Yep.
However, however, upon the different regulations, the actual code execution of the code, meaning how will be regulated the code, could be due to the protein interactions, meaning you have some sort of feedback how this code might work in terms of regulations over the code. So we know also there are lots of post-translational modifications in the proteins, but also there is a post modifications of the actual tRNA. So the tRNA, there are lots of very strange modifications. There are methylation, Phi, all kinds of different modifications, which is actually done by proteins. So that influence the recognition of the genetic code. Not to mention that the actual genetic code by itself is embedded into the amino acid synthetases. So amino acid RNA synthetases, this is a proteins which actually can recognize the correct amino acid with the correct tRNA. That's what makes the code code. So you can make translation based on that. So you're right that it goes in one direction from codes to proteins, but also there is another direction from proteins to influence the code recognition and also the code expression or level or modulation or fine tuning of the code. Well, the nature is very strange thing. Sometimes you can have very unexpected relations. You know this Lamarck versus Darwinian type of evolution. This particular they're both evolutionists, but the mechanism by which the evolution goes into a completely different. So if you compare those two, you will see that Lamarck actually postulate if you, of course, translate everything in the modern terminology, of course, that postulate to go from the proteins to the information, right? According to Lamarck. I mean, during his time, of course, he didn't know what is the information. He didn't know anything about those things. But I'm saying by modern standards, if you assume that Lamarck is correct, he would agree, you have to agree that there is a feedback from the proteins directly to the information, to the code. To some extent, that's happened to be correct, but to some extent, that it's not correct in general terms. So indeed, there is a feedback from proteins to the expression of genes, to the proteins to the recognition of the code, but it's not in this way that to the way that he meant to be. So what about subjective? The genetic code is a real code, but he's also objective. So he's a code is a terminology which we are using this terminology because there is a translation, of course, process. So it's positioned the specific amino acid, and it can translate this information from RNA to the proteins. That's why it's a code. So from one sort, it's a real code. It's a physical code. Now, it's totally different question how perfect is this code and how there is someone to write this code. And that's what usually creation is trying to make argument that because we call it code, therefore there's someone that made this code. I don't know. Did I answer this question to Lina or not? You can invite Lina to come inside. It's okay.
Yeah. The invite's out there. There are only certain people that are going to get in though, because I've got some nastiness going on out there. But let me try it again. See if Lina wants to come in and talk. She was interested in the bijective surjective thing, so which is a mathematical term, and that was one complaint I had. But the thing is that we can stretch and stretch and stretch on this code business, and nobody cares. We call it a code because we have a little table that tells us which sets of 3 codons map to which amino acid, and that's all we really care about. And this whole thing about a code is only important to creationists and people that are trying to make some point about intelligent design. And frankly, I don't care. I mean, I will continue to call it a code and admit it's a code for me. But if you want to start going further and say, oh, it's a code that somebody designed, well, then you're going to have to answer a whole lot of questions about why only 1.3% of the genome behaves that way, and why it is not basically why it is not bijective. And
I agree with that, but here it needs a little bit clarification from the science, because sometimes things matter. Sometimes it matters, sometimes it don't for the actual argument. Now, the argument which I was watching in this 14th, so you can actually play the video of 14th. We can stop from time to time, but the argument that it's 1.3%, it's 1.3% actually are so-called coded regions. So in the eukaryotic genomes, you have coded regions and non-coded regions. So the coded regions are those which are for proteins coding. And if you take just the exons and remove introns and all of the non-coded space, in eukaryotic systems, in eukaryotic genomes, you will have relatively small number. I don't know, is it 1.3 or 5% or 2%?
1.7. I don't know.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter
Under
exactly.
2. Yeah. We're pretty
But
sure
this
it's under
is-
2.
So you have a huge non-coding space in
Yeah.
the eukaryotic genome, but also you have to pay attention.
Ooh, what do they call it? Non-coding.
Yeah, it's a not coded region.
Non-coding. It's literally called non-coding. Okay, I'm trying to find out where Otangelo comes in here.
So based on this, you have relatively small percentage which is responsible for the proteins as a record in the DNA. However, you have also to pay attention, and that's argument. It's not doesn't go anywhere significantly in this type of debate, because in prokaryotic systems, for example, you have 100% of the DNA which is coded.
Oh, can I hear you? Okay.
Who is there?
I switched microphones.
Okay. So in a bacteria, it's not just 100. Sometimes in 150%, even more than 100%, it's coded. What does it mean? It means that sometimes the genes are presented in 5' to 3' ends on the positive DNA, but the same gene, the different genes actually can be used in the opposite strand of the DNA, and they can overlap actually.
Yeah.
And you may have not just 100, you may have 120, 150% coded region in the prokaryotic cells. So simply the organization of the genome in eukaryotic system, it's different. It's totally different than the organization of the genome of a prokaryotic system.
So we've got a really naive and uneducated person in chat who says that why do I need to keep denying it's a code? I didn't deny it's a code. I said it's a code. I've always called it a code. I've always said it was a code. 1.3% of it is a code. The rest of it is non-coding, so not a code. So I'm not denying anything. You got to pay attention, Smokey. I've already said that.
Okay, so that's what it is. However,
he talks about oh my God. Okay, go away, please.
I'm open for questions and discussions. Now, what is the argument here? I don't understand what is the argument by saying that it's caught, because the idea, for example, what I projected, what I can understand from Otangelo's arguments, he said because it's code and because it's very intelligent. Yeah, I think that was the show.
That it has to be designed.
Yeah, so because it's very intelligent, therefore there has to be someone that set up this code, intelligent designer. Also, there was some sort of argument about is the code is arbitrary or not arbitrary. So, and by that point, I don't understand what does it mean arbitrary or not arbitrary.
Yeah.
So let me say, if for example Snow White need to choose between white apple and red apple, and red apple is poisoned but the white apple is not poisoned, so if she need to choose between those two, obviously if she eats red apple, there won't be a prince that come. I mean, the prince will come, but he will not find. He will find dead body. But if she pick up white apple, she will stay alive, and the prince will marry her. So is this is arbitrary choice or not arbitrary choice? What does it mean, arbitrary choice?
Yeah.
But the idea of Otangelo is that because there is a arbitrary, someone have to take a action and to make a choice what is arbitrary and to take choice, and this someone of course should be highly intelligent person. That's the argument here, which is again very wrong, because the code by itself, yes, from one side is true that theoretically any kind of combination could be linked to any kind of amino acid. Evolutionary speaking, or any kinds of logically speaking, that is true. However, how that helps, I don't understand how that helps Otangelo's claim, Otangelo's actual argument for intelligent designer. So
Let me figure out what I did. I've done something. Oh, I know what I did. Okay, I'm back. Or I figured it out. Anyway, let's see. What else?
so you can play the video.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where, let's see, where did Otangelo come in? Let's see, right here?
Yeah, he's there.
Yeah, we can go ahead and try to play it and see what happens.
Into existence as that arbitrary assignment.
Oh, here we go.
The first question that
How the orbitals are, and argue.
You got
What?
Oh, Grasso.
Okay, here he is, the Grasso himself. How am I dodging? I said that 1.3% of the genome is a code, has codons.
Wait a minute, I don't think it's him. There's no last name there.
Oh, okay. It's a poser.
no, it's me.
Oh, it really
So,
is.
Okay, you
Actually,
are
this is something.
confirming,
This is something.
you are
I'm quoting
confirming that
here.
this is a code. So you have still to explain how it originated, Speed.
Well, that wasn't the question you asked me. You asked me if I accepted that it's a code.
No,
And I asked you-
That's not what I asked. I said here, look. The first question that I asked here: have you figured out that codes and assignments of meanings like 64 codons to amino acids require intelligence, since it is an arbitrary setup? That
No, they
was my
don't. No, they
question.
don't. No, they don't. No, they don't.
Okay, so hold on here now, Otangelo. Have you figured out that codes and assignments of meanings like 64 codons to amino acids require intelligence? No, I didn't read the whole question. No, I haven't figured that out yet. You're going to have to tell us how you can prove that, because I don't see it. I don't know.
You don't see it. Okay, so
No, I don't see
this
it.
is basically the question which is being asked for a month now, in special by John Maddox. And after we finally figured out that genes store genetic code, which was something which Leo denied, now we can come to the essential and big question mark and ask what caused that code into existence and that arbitrary assignment of 64 codons to amino acids, and why should there be a code at all?
Well, first of all, it doesn't appear to be arbitrary. They've done some statistics on it, and it appears to follow some statistical trends that indicate that it may have developed with the first two codons, and then I think the third wobble codon was kind of added on as more amino acids were added to the mix. So they've done some statistics on it, and there are a number of papers with proposals about how it did develop.
Hey,
Okay,
hold on, real quick.
No, I want to.
Okay, I don't care if
Hold
I
on.
start talking first, and I'm going to say
One person-
all with your nonsense.
Right.
Immutable brings up something interesting in the chat. So people are dodging when they don't agree with your claims, Otangelo. Is that what
Well,
you consider to be?
Immutable is agreeing with me that codes are arbitrary. They are assigned. There is meaning assigned of one symbol to another, and that is arbitrary.
Okay, but that doesn't answer his first question.
Okay, it's like, okay, if he's trying to say that they're arbitrary, but he's bringing in the idea that somebody sat there and decided, oh, I'm going to use this color for this, and I'm going to use that color for that. that it was arbitrary and somebody just on a lark, like God, decided he was going to use this codon for that and this codon for that. So that's kind of what he's getting to. So he's saying it's arbitrary. So that's proof that somebody just sat there and decided ad hoc, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
So, okay, so we can stop now. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he has any other argument, does he? Ever?
I mean, so, I mean, to my understanding, the idea is that because it's arbitrary, there must be an arbiter somewhere.
Yeah, right.
So that's the whole idea, right? So,
and for them, it is so obvious that they're right about this, that there has to be an arbiter.
So, as I mentioned, it is absolutely accurate to say that theoretically, the codes, I mean, any amino acids could be linked with different codes, and still the system will function. So there is a question right now: who decided about what and why exactly the code is that way? So is it possible to be a different way or something like that? So this is the legitimate question, actually.
Yeah.
So, but I don't see how this will go to an intelligent designer, because in fact, simply because we don't know exactly how it happened in terms of the choose between specific sequence and specific amino acid, those, it's still not argument for intelligent designer. Because what I mean, let me say, one of the very first hypotheses for assignment of the codons on the amino acids to the specific codons was the frozen accident model from Watson-Crick, from Crick. According to this model, there is nothing special in terms of what actually choose what is the actual sequence to the specific amino acid. It simply happened for first time. And because it's happened, everything else after that, it depends on the first event by chance. And because depends on the first event by chance, therefore, this code is frozen. That's why it's called this hypothesis frozen accident model.
Yeah.
However, here is some details about this particular hypothesis. I do not agree with this hypothesis totally. Although there is this hypothesis is a fact, let me share my screen to show you something. Share screen. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. Do you see it at the moment?
Yep.
Okay, so you see it at the moment. So let's. So I'll go back to this particular function. Okay, so if you see the distribution of the code, this is the distribution of the code from GC-rich codons to AU-rich codons. Now, if the frozen accident model was correct, you will not be able to somehow make groups in these codons. So, for example, if you see the amino acids like leucine, valine, isoleucine, and even methionine, this particular group are all fatty amino acids. And the middle base is U in the codon. Meaning you have a very interesting phenomenon here. You have a grouping by specific. So you have a grouping by specific feature of the amino acid. I mean, how it's possible if you have frozen accident model to have such a grouping? Not to mention that we are observing a zonal distribution between the different class of amino acid synthetases, which is very clear zonal distribution if you distribute the codons from GC rich to AU rich. Therefore, there must be a process which recruits this particular amino acids to this particular sequence to make it this to recruit or to assign this particular amino acids to this particular codons. And here we have this distribution. One of the hypotheses is that initially there was mostly GC-rich RNA. That's why it happened to be mostly the very first amino acids that was recruited was mostly GC-rich codons. So directly by this hypothesis, if you think about directly, the amino acids have two reasons to be recruited and assigned for particular codon. First reason, the reason number one, is the available combinations not taken from previous amino acids, so from previous assignment. And of course, if you are new amino acid, you should look for an available combination to assign. Of course, that there is no problem with this. It will be stupid anyone to deny that. Also, the moment when this amino acid is assigned, in this particular moment should be very important for survival of the complex of the organism, or let me say for the life complex. Therefore, you can still find a reason why these codons naturally, completely naturally was assigned in this particular way. Now, where is the frozen accident hypothesis in that case, which was postulated from Crick a long time ago? I think the frozen accident model is still available, but it's available only when these groups, already groups. So because the groups are in existence, they happen to be stages of evolution. In this particular group, for example, if you see the cysteine, leucine, valine, isoleucine, which has been recognized by class 1 amino acid synthetase, those group actually within the group, there might be a process of frozen accident. So showing this way, you see that although it's arbitrary and theoretically you can definitely have different codons for a particular amino acid, you can have a very clear, or at least you can have a logic that naturally the codons are as it is. So I'll stop sharing right now, but so I think I was very clear about how arbitrary is the codons.
Yeah.
So we can still find a very good reason this to be natural assignment, not artificially. So it's not necessary to have a particular arbiter to put the codons there.
That's like saying that a meandering river that turns right and left and right and right. Why does it turn right here? You know, it's somebody had to tell it to turn right. I mean, it's no different than a riverbed, basically, developmentally. And for some reason, they won't look at that developmental process. You know, that process of coming from very small systems and increasing in complexity until it's a greater system. So,
I mean, that is also, in addition to what I just described, I can say one more thing. If you order the amino acids from GC-rich to AU-rich, for example, all of the GC-rich presumably are very important for RNA peptide interactions. It will facilitate it very well. However, if you think about the evolution of proteins, you think from very small peptide, which is going to be longer peptide, and there will be a crucial moment when this longer peptide will fold. But once the peptide is folding, it creates a situation where you can meet two adjacent amino acids in close proximity and form so-called catalytic complex, catalytic center. Therefore, you create a new way of making function by making folding proteins, folding peptides, which as long as those became, they will be able to fold better and to create a new functions. And now pay attention. If I'm correct, you have to be sure that the second generations of amino acids that has been recruited to the codon must be involved in those kinds of interactions or those kinds of folding processes. So those should somehow facilitate the folding processes of the very long peptide. So this is the crucial difference between short peptide and protein, because the protein is a longer and have a folding, and this folding is important for the function. But if you have just a small peptide, there is no much folding. There is a bending, but not folding. And in that case, the function of the small peptides, it's dependent only from the whatever amino acid is this peptide, which is absolutely natural. So in that case, it makes perfect sense. And in fact, if you go and look the order of the amino acids from GC-rich codon to AU-rich codon, you will see that those in the middle are very important for exactly those kinds of secondary structures. Well, that's one way of thinking. So also I have to mention, all of this is correlative research, meaning there is no direct proof. We can say, yes, it's exactly that. Unfortunately, we humans can do only things that we humans can do. We cannot do things that we humans cannot do. Meaning, I cannot go back in time and take a scoop from the primordial ocean and bring it here for investigation. I cannot do that. What I can do is just making correlative research, and after that perform a research, actual research, and try to simulate these conditions in the laboratory. Therefore, I can figure it out what most likely happened back in time. Even in that case, there won't be a point that I will say, yes, for sure, that's exactly how it happened. So unfortunately, origin of life research is kind of a little bit more strange than any other research.
It's forensics, and the other thing it is it's almost exobiology, in that we're trying to find pathways, and we may find a pathway that is not the pathway that happened here, but it could happen, and it could happen somewhere else, that sort of thing. So I mean, it's a lot broader than that, and I think that there are going to be a lot of different paths to the same, to where life could have been created. And if we ever find life on another planet, I'm guessing that they are going to have slightly different amino acids, and things are going to be a little bit different. And like we wouldn't be able to survive on vegetation from another planet because of these differences. Because
I
I don't
mean,
think there's only one way for it to happen. Not
yes,
entirely.
of course. Of
Yeah.
course, I'm sure in different conditions that could be, for example, very close to the Earth conditions, but not exactly. The genetic code might appear to be a different. Uh, also, it depends on the conditions. You may have totally different type of life today. So I imagine a scenario where everything is super acidic in the planet, not Earth, but another planet. It's very acidic, but not to the point that it's lower than, for example, 3. But it never reach acidity, for example, higher than 6. What we know from biochemistry and the chemistry at all, we know that the peptide bonds are very difficult to exist in acidic conditions. They simply have tend to simply fall apart, the peptide bonds. Therefore, you may have a situation where only RNA could exist, not the proteins. Well, in this hypothetical another Earth situation, you might have situation where the entire life can be built up only from RNA, and there won't be any proteins around. So imagine the ribosome today as a mostly built up from RNA. Imagine that the entire life is built by mostly RNA. There won't be a protein. So you can have a very weird possibility for different types of life and different types of interactions in different conditions. Yep. So is there anyone, I mean, you can just look the chat and see, is there any questions? Immutable might come in. Lina might come in, or whoever wants to come in and just discuss further.
Yep.
I will continue to discuss another issue, for example, from Otangelo. He said that you must have a code to have origin of life. Therefore, you cannot build such a complicated code and to have all of the translation machinery. And that's the argument from the perspective of creationists. Now, this argument, it's not Otangelo's argument, of course. Those kinds of argument has been presented from Eugene Koonin in his paper, and he presented as a catch-22. So catch-22 is exactly that situation. In order to have a very high profile, or let me say high fidelity translation, you must have a lots of very well developed codons and translational system. But if you have such a translational system, you cannot go down and make very high fidelity codons. So it's kind of vice versa. It's catch-22, and that's exactly the terminology has been used from Eugene Koonin. Now, because this particular argument is very much suitable for creationists to take it out of the context, they're using constantly those kinds of arguments. First of all, I want to say that Eugene Koonin is not a creationist. Why I'm so sure? Because Eugene Koonin, he by himself have published papers back in 28, maybe 008, or something like that. I don't remember exactly the date, but Eugene Koonin himself, first of all, he have his own hypothesis for the polymer transition from RNA world to the RNA peptide world. You cannot publish such a paper if you are creationist, right? And also in all the papers, Eugene Koonin just presents a very good questions, highly well legitimate questions, which is we scientists, I mean the scientists, not only me, but the scientists asking, and everybody is asking, of course. But also there are lots of evidence and clues that there is an answer to these questions. So let me share my screen again. So yep, I'm sharing the screen. So
Okay.
show me the share screen. Yeah. So let's go back to the shared screen and find. Okay, so here you have a law for origin of life. And this law stands that during origin of life, the information, the structure, and the corresponding rule are locked in their origin. So from that perspective, you must have during the origin of life something that it carry on information. And also you must have a rule to execute the function. Now, from that perspective, Otangelo is a little bit correct because you must have all of these three components in order to have a life. However, he said that you must have a fully developed, all of the translation of the entire translational system, starting from the tRNA, ribosomal, amino acid synthetases, EFTU factors necessary, all of that, and all of the codons, you must have it in order to have life because you cannot reducibly complex it, destroy it. It's not accurate. The fact that you must have information, rule, and function does not mean you have to have a fully developed today modern system. You can have information, rule, and function in more primitive way. In fact, there is a hypothesis that the way could be extremely primitive. So primitive that it still possesses information, it still possesses function, and still there is a rule, but to be functional, the entire system to function well. So to claim that you must have fully developed system, it's not accurate to present. Also, what I have to say here, the publication of Eugene Koonin for the genetic code, the last publication, actually he have two reviews for genetic code. First review was back in 2015, I think was, and the second is 2017. So the 2017 review was very good review, actually. It's presented a lots of problems. However, Eugene Koonin never presented RNA peptide world as an option. And RNA peptide world was just started to progress, this hypothesis was just in a very new during that time. I hope if he will present, if he will make another review recent, I mean very soon probably, if he make another review soon, he will include the RNA peptide world hypothesis. So,
When was this Logic of Chance book written? Do you remember?
What is logic?
The Logic of Chance by Koonin. Do you remember what year that was written? Was that 2010 or was that early?
2017.
It was 2017. Okay.
17. So he has a review about origin of about the genetic code, actually.
Yeah. He went on that little lark about multiverses at the end of the book, but
that's probably it's a different paper, but he have a paper exactly dedicated to genetic code 2017.
okay. Here's what he has to say about Michael Behe and the black box. He said, of course, ID is malicious nonsense. In the very same book they always quote from that page 371, I think it is. This is what Kunin said about intelligent design. He calls it malicious nonsense. So he's obviously not a fan. But you have to use his quotes all the time. So
I recommend everybody read lots of Gene Kunin. Anybody that can read Kunin's very extensive technical work and come away with the idea that he's in any way in favor of intelligent design clearly can't read.
Right. Yeah, so this is the logic of chance. And this is by him. And the only thing is he went off on that arc about the multiverse, and he did that back of the envelope probability calculation, which I'm trying to find the copyright page here. Here it is. Let me see here. When was this thing copyrighted? 2012. So this is a 2012 book. Logic of Chance.
Yeah.
Kunin is ubiquitous in the technical field. He pops up a lot, and there's also Greater Wolf, double F on that, who writes a lot. Is so ridiculously brilliant that anything that he's involved with right now model that you get with intelligence on another planet.
You're really roboting a lot again, RJ. I wonder if I brought you in with Zoom and shared you on the screen. If that would no, that wouldn't.
That might work as well. StreamYard hates me. It does not work even without my camera on.
Yeah, I don't understand why.
Can you get me? You got a link with to in Twitter rather than emailing me?
Okay, I missed all of that.
Oh, can you put a link in for a Zoom on Twitter?
I'll be back, guys.
I could, yeah.
But because I don't. It's laborious to go around the email route. Twitter works faster. So I'm going to leave the studio and look for a message from you on there to bring me back on Zoom, and maybe that'll work better. StreamYard hates me.
Okay, I'll try. Let me see if I can start up Zoom. I've never done this before, so I don't know if this is going to work. I'm trying to think why we haven't done this before. If it, where are we? Oh God, I hate Zoom sometimes too. Cancel new meeting. Okay. Turn with computer audio. And let me see. Hi, Scott.
Hello,
Hey, Scott.
again. I think it's pretty sure that our friend Otangelo isn't going to show, so I thought I'd hop back in.
No, he's not going to show. So I am trying to figure out how to hook RJ up through Zoom. You think that will work? Can
I have no idea.
If I share the screen, the thing is the audio is going to be coming through my microphone. And well, I think I can do this. Hang on a second. Let's see. Copy invitation. Except he wants me to go to Twitter. God, I hate Twitter. I don't twit. I don't twit.
Make sure you wash yourself off after you've left Twitter.
Twit. Yeah, I'll try. Now I can't even find my messages because, of course, okay, it makes a little envelope. I see. How cute. How cute of them. Where's RJ? I got to find him. Okay, there he is. B. Okay, so now I have to wait for him. See if he pops in, and then I can try to share the screen.
This has been a very interesting discussion and presentation. I'm going to have to go back and reread Dimiter's papers and stuff.
Yeah, I want to understand a bit about the codons and the different classes of amino acids myself better. And my head is not in a good place today.
You would think that our various young Earth creationist people would be asking Dimiter questions right and left right now.
I know. So Stanley left the chat after putting out his usual bullshit. I think Stanley really believes. Well, the thing is, he really believes in Jensen, and he really believes in that whole group out there. And as long as he takes their word as being the word of God or the word of Trump, then there really isn't much he can do. You know,
I'm here, Mike. Oh, he's immutable. So usually the argument comes like, so how do you know that genetic code evolved? That's another argument from Otangelo. How do you know? How do you know that it's evolved? Oh my goodness. So we have lots of arguments that genetic code actually evolved. And there's many arguments actually. Now, so let's see. First, if you think about, and as you Mike mentioned before about the recognition of the third base of the codon. So if I'm able to share again, so let's see. Okay. Before to share, I have to pull out the paper. But my point is that we have a very good idea about the different mechanisms and the processes, mutagenesis and all of that. So if you look, so let's share one paper here.
Why are there two people in the stream?
Who is in?
Why are there two speed of sounds in the stream?
because I'm letting RJ in through Zoom, and I'm not sure if I can hear him or not.
I will say something.
Can you guys hear RJ? Because he's coming through my speakers, not through StreamYard.
He sounds there.
He sounds fine.
Okay, if you can hear him, it'll work. I can turn it up a little bit.
As I say, I love being with you guys, but I can realize how pathetic it is if I'm coming across as a robotic drill.
Oh my God, I've never heard your voice so clear. I didn't realize you were such a young man.
Yes, I'm just a little chipper 68.
I thought you were like, okay. Anyway.
Oh well, I'm also Neffy's nemesis.
Yes. You are many of them.
Sal doesn't like me either.
Yeah, Sal is mad at me now because what did I say? I said something about kicking his ass, and then I asked him for a spreadsheet, and he got really pissed off at me.
Yeah.
And
anyway, we were talking about Eugene Koonin and authority quoting.
Yep.
And that Koonin doesn't actually show up much in the anti-evolution literature, except fairly recently. Casey Luskin didn't bump into him until quite late in the game. And now you get these things that trawl through those approved quotes about supposedly problems with the Cambrian explosion and the like. And I go, oh, good gravy, read what he actually has to say.
Yeah. Well, it was, what is it, page 371 that they love to quote? It's toward the end of the book where he starts to go on about the multiverse and a few other things, and I think that
and that's what about. And remember, that's not his field, and it's irrelevant to the points of issue.
Right.
But all of this is that origins or bust crap, where they want to find ways to think about, well, there's mysteries, and we've got some authority quotes from this famous scientist who, in that book that's not written for a technical audience, but it's a general book, it says something I want to be true.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make the reptile-mammal transition go away. It doesn't make their religious arguments plausible as explanations for anything. It doesn't account for anything. It's just a dodge. I don't care what Eugene Koonin thinks, except insofar as the data is concerned.
Right.
And I keep reading his work, and it's meticulous about the systems that are involved in the origin of multicellularity. There's a ton of technical work that he's done on this. And the fact that all they trawl him on is the damn multiverse. He's not a physicist. This is not his field. This is just an opinion.
Yeah, he was waxing eloquent at the end of the book, basically, is what he was doing. And it is toward the end of the book. And that's what, and that's the page. Is it 317? I can't remember the famous quote where he said, you know, we're nowhere on abiogenesis. And he was like being honest, you know, being a little humble.
Well, that is the case. But the problem is we know lots more about the parameters than we did 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And the parameters are very clear. Life began somewhere around 4 billion years ago, probably hundreds of millions of years before the Luca organism appeared on the scene. It may or may not have involved things that eventually fizzled out, but may have been very dominant for quite a while in the early prebiotic stage and the early life systems before Luca came on the scene. And none of that fits any religious narrative. None. It's absolutely ludicrous to have particularly young Earth creationists come in, where they're trying to hijack these authority quotes and wave abiogenesis problems at them. But the young Earth creationist God is not an option. It's disqualified off the gate because it has a completely ludicrous chronology and all the sequence is wrong.
Yeah.
So whatever it is, you know, and Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva don't do any better. None of the religions do. None of them describe what we actually can see in the fossil record. So go away and come up with something better, because that ain't gonna cut it.
Okay, RJ, let's stretch our imagination and go to the end of creationists. So my point is, let's go and imagine that the creationists are correct. Just for the heck of the argument, okay? Just imagine that they are accurate. And there is a super intelligent being which actually created all the living and all of the life there, including genetic code. So, and let's witness with our imagination. So let's witness what, for example, Otangelo will see. He will see when he is trying to witness the moment of creation. And actually, lots of musicians in the medieval ages and lots of painters in the medieval ages, they tried to create that such a dramatic atmosphere, a wonderful atmosphere, right? Beautiful moment of creation. So what you will observe. So what you'll observe if you're there, back in time. What you'll see. So you'll see how, for example, the creatures just pop up from nowhere, just appeared. Like you remember the Terminator movies?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you remember this, how the Terminator appear from the time frame in one bubble, like it's appear. So okay. So most likely something like that you can imagine such a wonderful moment that every creature is just in the same way, just appeared from nowhere. Pop up, pop up. Here is the elephant. Here is the rabbit. Here is the lizard. So and suddenly, isn't that cool?
It'd be pretty interesting.
You realize what you've just done, Dimiter? is something that no creationist ever does, which is to envisage what the creation events would look like.
Yeah.
I literally know of no instance where anybody in the young earth creationist camp visualizes what creation involves. And the same
Yeah.
goes for the intelligent design gang. You will look in vain for any description of this. And this is why I have my killer question that I love to ask intelligent design people. I'll ask them, how many creation events were there during the Mesozoic? And it's instant crickets. They've never thought about it.
So I mean, that's what it is. So ask
Yeah,
them.
I always want to see what it's like when a herd of elephants suddenly appears on the savannah. Just boom, you know.
Yeah,
I want to know what the what happens to the air that they displace. Yeah.
it will be like a thunder. So thunder after thunder. It's just
Your older creationists and your intelligent designers don't think about that in principle. That creation is a vague blob. The creator creates stuff, and that's as far as it goes. And they'll wave icons like the bacterial flagellum or whatever, and that's as far as it goes. They don't ever really think through the process. If you were sitting there watching a creation event, what would you see? Now, the young earth creationists have a different box. They theoretically could have creation of species, creation of families. It could be just about anywhere across the mix if they felt like it, except they've got the damned ark. They have to cram everything on board Noah's Ark. So they have a double bottleneck with their Barrowmans that forces them to do systematics. And as we all know, when you start looking at their Barrowmanology, they start stumbling at the details because they pretty soon have to blur the boundaries so broadly at the family level or maybe even higher that how can they then defend human beings not being primates? And they're caught on the logic of their own argument, so they get into trouble. But at least they try.
Well,
right? And company don't even try.
Yeah, RJ, do you know the answer why the dinosaurs did not survive the ark, the big flood? Do you know?
It's not just them. You can actually look at the ark encounter, which is whittled down the kinds to only 1,500 to get them onto the ark comfortably. Fine and dandy, goody gumdrops, largely at the family level. 54% of all the critters on board the ark, according to their own model, went extinct afterwards. Boy, that's a
wow! Holy crap!
So to me, this is a miracle. So that's a miracle. So my understanding of miracle is event which have a very low probability. So by definition, that's a very low probability event. And I don't understand why, for example, once we have tools, we know lots of processes that it's happening in the field of mutagenesis and the field of the molecular biology, especially observe all of these mutagenic events, formation of new genes, formations of all of the tools like a recombination, deletions, amplifications, mutations, all of that tools are available. And if you look, for example, at events like, for example, reassignment of the codon, because I don't know, is it 33 or 31, because there might be much more reassignments.
I'll do a book plug for the rocks were there. We had a whole appendix in there on that codon reassignment issue. About the only person who's kind of dived into it from the side is Paul Nelson, the young earth creationist at the Discovery Institute, and he dibble-dabbled with a little bit of it a ways back. But it's not been a subject that anti-evolutionists are terribly keen to look into. But basically, there are dozens of different organisms, both in bacteria and also mitochondrial variations that have switched over, because the mitochondrial endosymbionts still have their own proprietary DNA, and they have undergone some mutations. Those codon reassignments are all extremely regular. They always involve the redundant codons. There are no, if a designer did this from scratch, theoretically, and if the codon assignments were totally arbitrary, he could have taken a tryptophan, for example, and made it a codon with a completely different assignment, because I think it's the one that has just a single codon triplet that codes for it, and put a different one to do that, and then use one of the redundant ones to replace it. But that's not what we find. We never find that. It's always serine and some of these other ones that are allowed to flip over to a different codon assignment, because they can actually see the process of that wobbly third codon that takes on a new dynamic. They can even see this in the process of happening in living organisms. So the idea that this would be other than a purely natural process is out of it. And the thing that I pointed out, that if this is what I've been trying to get Sal and various other ones who brought up this damn codon issue and the code issue. If the coding assignments are truly arbitrary, why is it so oddly distributed? You could theoretically give each amino acid 3 codons and then have a couple left over for your start and start codons, but that's not what we find. We find an oddly skewed arrangement where some of them have.
Oops, that's right. I'm sorry.
And one of them, in which the stop codon is shared with, I think, metathione or one of those, where they share a codon assignment. That's positively wacky. And if you look up the number of permutations, you could theoretically have literally every created kind could have its own proprietary DNA code. That would have been a pure signature of creation, where they generate all uniform proteins, but with a completely different coding system that is unique to each kind. That would be impossible to account for by an evolutionary framework, and would be an absolute pure signature of creation if the codon assignments are arbitrary. But that's not what we find, which suggests the codons are not arbitrary, that there's a stereochemical relationship. As you, Dimiter, have been working into the idea that you have connections between the RNA components and peptides that's occurring in a prebiotic system. So that's your field. I think you should run with that for the rest of the discussion.
No, it is very interesting because it's look like that the super duper creature, it's just not inventive enough to make unique code for any creature.
Yeah. And
Why?
Literally, the permutations available, you could probably even have proprietary DNA code for every bloody species if you decided to have a creator that makes individual species. And here, by the way, is one of the giant blind spots of all anti-evolutionists. This is a uniform phenomenon across the board, and anybody can test it out. They have a terrible problem conceptualizing speciation in general. The grassroots creationists still think that speciation can't happen at all, even though the baraminologists have accepted gigantic amounts of speciation, which they have to in order to keep the number of kinds down. So they have hyperspeciation going on in younger creationism. At the same time, that Ken Ham probably thinks there's no speciation at all because he doesn't actually read his baraminologist.
Yeah, exactly. So just to summarize, why? So you have we have all the events proven, like mutagenesis. We have all the tools proven, like mechanisms where the mutagenesis is undergoing, shown with different systems, and also it shows by the reassignment of the code by different codons reassignment that indeed the code is not steady state situation. And also we have all the tools which are capable to develop the code, in fact. So think about that. How likely is to have a miracle from one side, which is highly improbable by definition, And from another side, you have all available tools in front of you, highly probable to develop and to evolve the code. What is more likely, 1 or 2? Think about that. So,
Look at the sweat equity involved. That you're an example of somebody that's doing origins of life research, and there is a small cadre of various scientists. You could gather them together, and you wouldn't need a giant stadium to put them all in. But the point is that they're the ones, and you're the ones doing the actual research and work. No anti-evolutionist does work in this field. They're just interlopers snarking from the sidelines, snipping little authority quotes out, complaining about this and that, but they're not putting in any of the sweat equity.
yeah, there's no explanation it's coming. So, because, for example, some creationists and in Otangelo, they like analogy. So let's make one analogy in this situation. So imagine you see a picture, just a picture painted with paints like watercolor paints, for example, a picture next to you. And now you see on the left side somewhere, you see a little Dorothy, which was holding a paints and brushing with the paints around. But you didn't see that this picture is created by little Dorothy. It's painted by the little Dorothy. So think about that. You saying, the creationists used to say, okay, I don't see how the little Dorothy will make this picture. Although I see that the little Dorothy have a brushes, I have a paint and so on, but I never saw how little Dorothy actually draw this picture. Therefore, this picture, it's appeared from nowhere, and little Dorothy is not involved at all in the making of this picture. How stupid is this?
It's a special type of stupid. It's a very special type of stupid.
So it's kind of denying the obvious, something which is obvious in front of you.
That's what creationists do best.
Yeah. And the thing is a reason why, and I'm delighted that the phrase "origins of us" is starting to kind of get used more. I've seen Theophilus use them and others, Theo, because it's the reason why they bring all of this stuff up. They don't want to deal with the reptile-mammal transition. They don't want to deal with the biology of living systems and all the signs that we can see about things that evolve over time. And they'll do everything they can to deny that there's natural processes running on. And that gets them farther and farther away from the field. So they jump back to where did life originate? But even if it were a bloody miracle, even if their magic spurgle was the one responsible for it, it doesn't make the therapsids go away. And it doesn't make the fact that the Bible or any of these other religious documents doesn't explain anything accurately. None of that changes.
Exactly. So, also the field is under the development. So the field of origin of life, although it's a very difficult field, it is obviously why it's very difficult. We don't have the object to study for.
Yeah.
Even so, we are going and crippling slowly but surely to some sort of very clear answers for this.
Now,
And
the debate in my lifetime has been gigantic, from just the rudimentary experiments that Miller-Urey were doing back in the 1950s to the kinds of stuff that you're doing and Sutherland and all these other people, Sostak, where they're really dealing with very specific procedures, working out what doesn't work and what does work to try to work their way into this. But remember how difficult the problem is, that we're trying to reconstruct conditions that are not the way now. We have a world that's awash with life, with bacteria, where any little prebiotic chemistry that might occur theoretically gets munched up and scrunched up by all the biological systems that are already in place. So we have to peel all that back. We have to peel back all of the existing biology, even before the Lucas system,
is occurring. Last universal common ancestor. All of that's immensely difficult. And what all I
Exactly.
can do is to point out to people that something like lightning, which you would think is the simplest thing in the world, we still don't know how lightning is formed in a thundercloud.
Exactly. So, I mean, at least if we knew exactly what was the prebiotic conditions to some extent, at least we can simulate it somehow, these conditions. And I'm sure we'll approximate that. So there will be soon the right experiment. There will come the right experiment very soon. And someone will show the formation of primitive translation. I'm emphasizing the primitive translation in the lab will be shown soon. I hope so. So, and then what? Then what will happen with all of the rest?
Going to do that. That's a goalpost that's going to be hard to move.
Exactly. So I will.
It's been demonstrated, as a matter of fact, that that magnesium alone is enough to facilitate like the transfer of like the coupling of phosphate to nucleosides.
Now, there's been a lot of work on that just in the last couple of years, and so anybody that wants to investigate that, Google magnesium origin of life, and you'll start seeing a bunch of the technical papers that are occurring on that field. There's an amazing amount of stuff going on, and any creationist who is betting, this is ironic because this is a problem that's been there all along. Louis Pasteur in the 1860s warned the biogenesis people back then about the dangers of trying to pin God on this issue. Because he says, what happens if scientists figure out how to make life? You're screwed. You've just undercut your religion that way. And he was warning them about that 150 years ago. And apparently that memo has not settled in.
Yep.
People are real confused in the chat about this. It looks like you're my voice, RJ.
You're possessed, Mike. You're possessed from spirit of RJ.
I am possessed. Yeah.
You're possessed.
Well, that's a terrible thing to have to sound like me, but what can you do?
Well, I told my that I have a voice box, and I chose RJ, the RJ Downward model. My voice box.
Yeah. At least I'm not roboting. That's the other thing.
Oh, this is great.
I can't see who's all in the thing. I've heard Walker just a bit ago, and of course we have you and Dimiter. Is anybody else in the stream?
I think that was a mute. I'm trying to find. I don't know where Walker is. He hasn't been around.
That's always a good question. He's either with his girlfriend or doing studying or some other crap.
At least he's not stalking crocodiles like you do,
Stalking crocodiles. Oh my gosh.
Or alligators or whatever the fuck you have.
Okay, so that's the voice I was mistaking for Walker.
Yeah, it's immutable.
Who was just talking?
Immutable Destiny.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, because several people have very similar voices, and so unless I was seeing the icon, I was mistaking him for somebody else. Because all I got is your mug on my screen in the Zoom meeting.
I have to get OBS to work because then I can bring everybody in through Zoom and just.
How many people does Zoom allow in the stream at one time?
I'm not sure. I pay for it, so I think 10 or something like that.
I've never had any difficulty, even with huge groups of Zoom.
Really?
But they're StreamYard, I glitch up a lot, and the more people that are in StreamYard, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
So from my end of it, and I'm not apparently the only person that has that difficulty. Of course, I'm a cheapskate. It's all the free system for me. I'm not buying the Premiere, but apparently it's a problem even for people who pay for the higher end of it. So
yeah, I pay for the higher end of this, and I'm really irritated that they can't do any better than what they're doing. So I really want to dump it. It's like $40 a month or something like that.
But discussions like this, I think, are useful because I don't think anybody should be intimidated by the origins or bust argument. That even though science hasn't worked out all the fiddly bits in the same way we don't know how lightning is formed in a thundercloud, still there's been an enormous amount of progress. And when you start analyzing the problems that the religious explanations have, as Dimiter has pointed out and I point out, that this is an argument that they really shouldn't be making such a big deal about. Because it doesn't get rid of evolution. It doesn't rescue their magic spermals. It doesn't resolve any of those things. It's just stamping their feet and hoping that somehow or other, well, the god of codons, and now we don't have to think about it anymore. Well, it's the god that was okay with slavery and said you should kill witches. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that?
Yeah.
I
The
like
god
the
of codons.
god of the codons. It
The
sounds
god of the codons.
yeah.
That's what it boils down to. I mean, you try to get Sal and Otangelo and all these others to get past that, to think about what does it mean to have their creation. And because they're young Earth creationists, they're talking about a creation only 6,000 years ago, when all the organisms that we know have to somehow have come into existence. And that means they have to really work out how many kinds there were that were created in Eden, which Adam named every single one of them according to the Bible. And then about 1,400 years later, there was a cataclysmic flood that killed off everything except the kinds that were put on the ark. And then, so all of that diversity that we see in the fossil record came from those kinds in only 1,400 years. And then those same kinds proliferated into an entirely new, different bunch. Do you realize that Andrew Snelling is trying to argue seriously today in 2021 that all of the mastodons and mammoths appeared from the elephant kind after the Tower of Babel and then went extinct?
Yeah.
Really? That's
Stanley was going on about that today, about how epigenetics accounts for this diversity, of all these different animal kinds. And then I'm thinking, okay, so they were created, the kinds were created, and then 1,400 years passed. And did they differentiate during the years before the flood? Or did it all of a sudden?
I have a section on epigenetics in, I think, tip 1.4 or 5, somewhere around in there, at my website, where I went through, because mainly the ones that really launched into it were the intelligent design advocates. They were waving, "Oh, epigenetics, it's non-Darwinian, it's like something." Well, in fact, there's an article on the evolution and origin of epigenetics. It looks like it's really starting to kick in during the Cretaceous for certain kinds of dynamic systems among vertebrates. It seems to be connected to evasions of parasites. There's a whole bunch of things that are going on as a regulatory system, and it's got an evolutionary history. It's not conventionally Darwinian, but it's still natural. And the fact is that technical literature is just not discussed by the people who are trying to wave epigenetics at us. It's not another rescue mechanism, SFD.
I'm trying to adjust the microphone, and I think everything I do is real loud. What's that?
He's fine. He's fine now. It's just that he was low a few minutes ago.
Okay. You guys are pretty loud, so.
Yeah, I'm shrill too.
This is an experiment. An experiment that should get me serious about using OBS, I guess.
The general principle with anti-evolutionists is the more they attempt to be technically precise and bring up the buzzwords, the more you should check out what the material is, because you'll discover that they are riffing off of authority quotes. They're channeling approved arguments that are coming apologetically, but they're not really doing their own original research. And in virtually every case, you're going to discover that there's a technical literature behind it that's not supporting their position. And they literally don't know that's there, because all they're doing is channeling the quotes.
Well, I mean, I think that Maddox and Otangelo are likely getting their sources from creation websites.
Yeah.
And even so,
you can tell.
Yeah, and even so, they're not doing the bare minimum of reading the context that surrounds the citation of interest, that they're trying to quote and prove abiogenesis is impossible for such and such reason.
And they don't have their own model, because here's the other giant shoe that drops. Okay, fine and dandy, you got problems with natural evolution. Come up with your damned model. Young Earth creationists are in a terrible bind here, way worse than intelligent design advocates, because intelligent designers can kind of punt everything off to a vague never land of billions of years ago, or the Cambrian explosion, 500 million years ago. No, the young Earth creationists are in a bollocks, because they have 2 human beings as the very first humans, from which all the genomes of extant human beings must have come filtered through the Noah's Ark bottleneck. Well, that's only 6,000 years old. That, you should theoretically be able to paleogenomically reconstruct all of that. And SFT and a bunch haven't apparently spotted that your Jensens and your Tompkins and your Carters are kind of promising to do this, but in fact getting nowhere close to working out what Adam and Eve's genome were. Like, did they have ALUs and how many?
Everything I track down, it falls apart within a couple paragraphs of the paper they reference.
Yeah.
And
the addiction to authority quotes is not a new phenomenon. This is how anti-evolutionism has always run. And when you go all the way back to St. George Mivart in the 1870s, it's basically the same kind of shtick. And there's only a few modest arguments that are made. The origins are bust. Where did life come from? How did consciousness arise? Where did we come from?
Yeah.
And that's the common thread that actually links up all anti-evolutionists.
I
can't think of a single anti-evolutionist who is not ultimately worried that human beings aren't special. That's the thing that bothers them. They could care less about trilobites.
That is the whole thing behind Christianity, that human beings are somehow special in the universe, and if they're not, but we need a kind of a Babel fish. So when they produce a cherry pick quote, it goes into our program, and out comes 5 quotes from the same paper that support, that basically counter what they say.
And that's where source methods become so useful. And the fact that we have such an advantage now in the 21st century, as opposed to even 10, 15 years ago, is that with very few exceptions, most of the technical literature is going to be available open access, freebie. So you don't have to pay any money for it. And if you are really desperate, contact the author of the paper. They'll probably send you a PDF of it if you ask. So for all practical purposes, you can track down the technical literature and you will discover that there's more there. And so now the question is, to what extent did the creationists simply riff off of an authority quote that somebody else did versus one where they're culling the material on their own recognizance? So they're the ones that are suppressing the information as opposed to simply copying somebody else that suppressed the information. And that's where you get into those telltale ellipses, the little notes where they put down who said the quote. You can sometimes use those clues to track down if they're getting it from a particular website or not. I've been doing that. I've just begun. Otangelo lobbed a video that he did last year, and then also a posting he put up at his Reason and Science thing, which is just a pile of stuff on Nobel Prize winners, dissidents of evolution. And I'm going through and looking up every single one of the quotes that he put in the video, which, by the way, he did not reference. The video only listed the Wikipedia biography information for the various scientists, not the actual source for the quote. And some of these things, I found one already that most probably was culled from a creationist website, because the wording that he uses is uniquely specific to that, and it doesn't occur anywhere else.
Yeah, my one of my favorite moments was John Maddox during a debate about 6 months ago. He was being really arrogant, and he was asking, I forget who it was, I think it was Rib, and he was asking him, have you heard of microRNA and how it's completely upset the phylogeny of mammals, right? And so anyway, it was a paper that was from 2005 or 6 or something like that. So
it was earlier. No, it was. I thought it was a little later than that.
Maybe it was 2010. But anyway, I contacted the author of the paper and asked him about it. I said, did you, overturn or completely turn the mammal phylogeny inside out? And he said, the short answer is, I was wrong. Our database, we had the wrong database. And and basically he said it almost ended his career, because he
and that's a perfect example again of source methods.
Yeah,
that when somebody uses a scientist odds are that the creationist has never thought to contact the original
Right.
scientist. All they're doing is just riffing off of it. But you can do that.
And then
If we get umpteen people, thousands, tens of thousands of activists who will be doing those sorts of things and interconnecting so that they can find out, oh, well, here we find out about that, and that information is being spread smoothly, this is going to dissolve creationism in a pile of sound source methods, because I guarantee you this is a game they cannot play.
the most interesting part about that story was how I found that author, because John Maddox absolutely refused to tell me which paper he was referring to. So I went and started doing some Googling, and the first thing I came up with was AIG. So I came up with this AIG source, and they referenced a science article that was written in, sort of an editorial piece. And then I went to that article, and then I found the actual author of the paper, and then I got his email, and then I talked to him, and unwound the whole story.
So look at that daisy chain.
I know.
John Maddox refuses to give his source.
Right.
You use sound methods to locate that he's riffing off of an AIG creationist source, which was itself riffing off of a secondary account of the actual technical paper,
Right.
which investigated the actual author, turns out that the guy was wrong and admitted it.
Yeah. and that was just a wonderful story.
Now, what the hell was keeping Maddox from doing any of this?
Pride.
Lazy?
Plain and simple.
Well,
Very simple answer to that one. Pride. Maddox is a very prideful individual. He will never admit that he's wrong.
Isn't that a bad thing in the Christian context?
Well, the other thing is fear, because he would give you his paper willingly unless he was a little bit afraid that because he knows that he has not tracked down the sources. So he's afraid that you're going to do it and show him wrong, which I did.
Yeah.
So fuck him.
And the thing is that this sound method thing is not a little side issue. It sounds kind of geeky. Oh, we're looking up sources and footnotes and internal references. Oh, this is the rubber hits the road world of scholarship. And this applies in all areas of inquiry. It's just as relevant for dealing with political statements. It's just as relevant dealing with COVID-19 vaccination issues. Every single issue that you can think of is ultimately a sound source methods issue. So the methods that we're applying in this case translate into all other areas, that you track down what the data field is, you make sure that you're playing fair with your sources, you're not misrepresenting what people are doing, you're not playing authority quote trolling games, you're trying to find out what the data are and offer a cogent explanation for them. And if you're saying the current model's wrong, well, you have to come up with a model that explains it better. And if you can't do that, then go away.
Yeah.
The people sometimes do not realize the level of peer review in the papers, and you have to understand that you can say whatever you want, but there is a filtration system which they could be recognized how stupid and how rubbish is your claim. And trust me, it's not easy to publish a paper. You have to go and you have a very good peer review. Some of the papers have 3, 4, even 5 peer reviews. I remember, for example, my second paper was peer reviewed for the genetic code, was peer reviewed by 4 different scientists. Therefore, you cannot say something which is kind of rubbish or not logical, something like that. And also, there is a level of honesty among the scientists. Not every time, of course, but for example, I remember Jacques Zostak, he pulled out 2 of his papers. That was the papers was actually dedicated to the non-enzymatic replication, where he added arginine in order to prevent this folding of RNA. In order,
pull. And of course, intelligent design advocates in particular were just crowing over this. Oh, you see, they had to retract the papers.
Yeah.
This is all. Yeah, and
But that demonstrates level of honesty. So that demonstrates a level of honesty. So you realized your mistake and you just pull out your paper. That's it.
As a matter of fact, as it just so happens, I was reading a paper, I think it was last night or the night before, and I've posted in the private chat of this, where it's talking about endosymbiosis, and it's talking about how certain data is causing new hypotheses to arise from it. And actually, at the very end of the paper, it gives you kind of a snippet of what, criticism is like in the scientific community. Because if you jump down like to one of the last pages, it actually goes through some of the reviewers making comments on this article in regards to some of the references that were made and used as arguments by the authors, and
Yes.
critiques that they have, and how the author has responded and revised his paper to accommodate those criticisms and
some
challenges.
journals, particularly ones that are more relating to theoretical cutting edge kind of stuff, will actually have, as part of the article, all the back and forth from the various criticisms that come in. And that can be very, very revealing, because you're basically looking over their shoulder and seeing how a hypothesis is put forward and how it gets raked over the coals and how they have to consider whether they were dealing with all of this relevant information. And you find that also when you get the comments on technical papers. You find this in proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences and Science and Nature, where even though it's gone through peer review, there are people who disagree with it, and they will write in criticisms and they will be responses to it. And what you often find is that back and forth aspect is suppressed in the creationism response, that they will bring up a technical paper and forget to mention that it had a lot of criticism and that there was in fact pushback on it, because they only want it for the purpose of their apologetic argument. And of course, remember, Answers in Genesis and ICR and for that matter, the Discovery Institute have their air quotes peer-reviewed journals in their in-house, but it doesn't really run quite the way that peer review does in the normal world.
I mean, what is it? Like Jensen recently, there was I believe it was AIG or Creation Ministries International or one of those people, but our little YouTube community has actually gotten on Jensen's nerves so much that essentially he's just said like that nobody knows as much about genetic entropy as he does. Like he's gone absolutely like on the defensive about this issue.
It's also really important to look at the various camps, because if you only read one little niche, you'll get a weirdly different view of creationism. The creationist apologetics at ICR and AIG is like a glee club, and everything is sweetness and light, and they all agree completely. Oh, they don't. It's only when you start looking in the background footnotes, like the heat issue, that you discover that there is a huge disagreement over almost every core concept of young Earth creationism: accelerated radioactive decay, catastrophic plate tectonics, floating forests. All of these models that are put forward by little niche groups have strenuous criticism of them by other people. So always keep track of looking at AIG and CMI and ICR and read the footnotes of their papers to find out, because it's going to be kept buried in the side issues. But it really requires a little bit of burrowing to realize, oh, they are not nearly as in agreement as they want to give the impression.
So what is the floating force thing? Is that how everything dispersed after the arc?
Oh, it's even wackier than that. Kurt Wise wants to figure out how coal forests are occurring. So he actually has these gigantic floating forests pre-flood that get kind of swept up as a gigantic blob and then turned into stuff, into coal, baked super fast. It also allows him to have whole ecosystems of organisms preserved as one big blob, which of course is what we see in actual paleontology. And also he hasn't really thought this through, but it's dangling the prospect that this can account for post-flood distribution of animals. But they really haven't thought this one through very well. because they can't. There's no way they're going to be able to integrate all of this information. And so as you move away from animals that live in the Middle East and in Asia to stuff in the Americas and Australia, boy, their apologetics kind of drops off the map.
Well,
but yeah, floating forests, it's been roundly criticized by other creationists. And there's a whole issue. We brought it up a bit in The Rocks Were There. And we talk about a lot of shit in The Rocks Were There.
but they were laughing at the surfing monkeys or something a few weeks back.
Oh, yeah. Casey Luskin put a snotty little post up at the Discovery Institute with this parody of the Titanic picture with Jack and Rose at the front of the ship, except it's two chimpanzees. And but what they forget is that when they're talking about these rafting primates, we're talking about basal primates. These things are small enough to hold in your hand.
Yeah.
And you don't need to have a gigantic raft. You could have a blob of land that's 10 feet across that could have an actual population of these critters moving across. And remember, although it's unlikely, it only needs to happen a couple times.
Yeah, but it's crazy that they were using the same idea, except at a much larger scale.
Yeah, and the problem is when you try to scale it up, here's another issue, is that they have lots of evidence about growth in these ancient forests. So we know that there are, for example, forests can get covered with ash falls and all that, but that doesn't mean everything dies all at once. And so you can have an instance where the plants have continued to grow and all of that. There's enough evidence that's known in the creationist literature that these forests are not trees that are swept up in a flood and dropped willy-nilly. No, these are actual forests with roots. So in order to keep that record intact, they've got to have the whole forest move around.
with surfing mammoths.
Very different. It's in different environments. When you have a tropical coal forest in a spot that's now the Midwest and it gets cold in the winter, how do you account for that paleogeography? How do you account for the climate shifting that's going on? It's an utterly unbelievable mess for creationists to try to deal with. And that's why when you start diving into the fiddly bit details, it starts falling apart. We're going to be putting a really neat section on the Pacific Northwest paleogeography of these ancient terrains that go back hundreds of millions of years. The Pacific Northwest geology is really complicated. And I would love to see a creationist try to figure out what the hell they think was going on during the flood that could scrunch all of the real estate of my neck of the woods together in just a period of a few years or a century or so. It's just nonsense.
Yeah. I've got to put a link to your book is a masterpiece. And not only that, but it's like an encyclopedia.
Well, and Jackson and I make a really kick-butt team because he sees things that I don't, and I see things that he didn't, because first of all, I'm an old fart. So I have a sense of the history of the background of the creationist arguments that he isn't as familiar with just because he's younger. But he's also getting the cutting edge because he's in college. So he's bumping into directly the latest. Anybody that's been to college knows that when you come out of high school and you go into college, you suddenly discovered how little you knew. And you start catching up with the latest research that's now being presented at the college level that didn't make it into your 20-year-old textbook in high school. Well, that's exactly the advantage that Jackson has. I keep track of a lot of the technical material, but we've all been building up a network of people with a lot of different expertise that then we can draw on. And we're also, both of us, very methodical. He was doing source methods before I got onto his field, and he was doing that anyway, and I was doing it. And so between the two of us, we're just diligent, and we track down stuff because the material is available there. And then our goal is to explain it in a way that makes it not only clear to everybody what's going on, but also beautifully documented and damn funny.
And only $5.99 on Kindle.
Yeah.
So I bought both.
Or you can get the big physical book that's very thick and you can use it as a doorstop. And when creationists bump into you, you can walk them over the head.
Walk them over the head. I actually use it to, I throw it at raccoons to chase them.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And, Volume 2 will be just as big. The reason why we had to split it in two, we were very quickly realizing that we were diving into these 4 creationist books at such depth, more depth than they did, that it was going to be quite a massive undertaking. And we've been delighted with it because, my gosh, the material that's available is just astonishing. It's internet accessible. You can get this crap just mouse clicking. So absolutely nobody has an excuse in 2021 to be ignorant. It's only laziness that can cause you to do this, because this stuff is out there. You and I know it. We don't have money to buy this stuff. We get it freebies, and that's how much available for people who just look.
Yeah.
It's there.
I own both, so I had the Kindle and the.
And don't forget too, the rocks were there. I'll shameless plug that as well. I mean the Evolution Slam Dunk, the book that I did before that, because that is on the reptile mammal transition, and we allude to it in the book. But the big skivvy is about it in the original one, because this is an area that's full blown macroevolution that anti-evolutionists are screwing up constantly on. We're still, there's going to be stuff in rocks too about the attempts to get rid of the reptile mammal transition. Raw Matt has taken into it. Nephilim Free has tried to stab at it. There's been some more material amongst a handful of creationists on this point that have come up at CMI, but it's still just hand waving. They're really evasive on this material. Dapper Dino is, I still got to do a second part on it. He was dealing with, I think, Raw Matt's video on it, and there's a second part in there where I guess he's going to be plugging Evolution Slam Dunk. But I was quite pleased doing that, because it was an area that isn't as widely known as it ought to be. It's been mentioned occasionally in the pro science literature, but they're not as sexy as dinosaurs. They're just little fur balls and that, but they're us. And when you discover that we've got the smoking gun of these transitional forms that were explicitly and uniquely predicted by Robert Broom back in 1912, the double jaw probenignathus and diarthrognathids, that there's no reason for these critters to have existed other than evolution. Either that, or the designer really loves evolutionists a lot to go out of their way to make these forms. And it's a great story.
Damn. So the problem with this is I can't mute my microphone. If I have to cough, I have to walk across the room to cough.
Yeah. Well, it's a good thing nobody can see my picture anyway, because I'm still in my jammies. Although I did get up really early for some strange reason at like noon. Sometimes I'll be sleeping into 3 o'clock. I work till like 3, 4, 5 in the morning. And so in the summertime, I'm going to bed at sunrise typically. But I'm by nature a night owl. So I'm still unshaven, scrumpled, and in my jammies.
This book here, Vertebrate Paleontology, by let's see, that's by Michael Benton.
Oh, Michael Benton, yes, he's a very much mammal paleontology in particular, although he does bump into other various areas. Still very active, publishes technical papers and that all the time.
Yeah,
Benton is one of those that does collaborative work as well as general science works. More and more of the material. Oh, by the way, what's the date on that book?
The date is 2015.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's quite recent. Anybody that dives into paleontology should bear in mind how fast the field has been going.
Yeah,
if they've got a paleontology book that's not 21st century, it's not that it's going to be inaccurate, but it's going to be not up to date. Yep. Because the field has expanded so rapidly. So the more you are in the 21st century, the better you are, especially written by somebody that has really good cred, like Benton Dykes. He's a good writer as well as a meticulous scientist.
Yeah, I was fascinated with this diagram where they turn, the mechanics of fish jaws into these diagrams on the right. And I was talking to Nephilim Free. I think I was in chat on one of his channels, and he was going on about how they found they found a fossil, and it was obviously a different variation of a human skull. And I was trying to point out to him that these paleontologists get into a lot more detail than that when they try to decide whether it's a human skull or whether it's something else. And
well, anybody, and this is a good litmus test. If you go into a paleontology museum, how easy can you identify at least the general structures of things? If you can't tell a mammal just by sight, looking at that gigantic dentary bone and its zygomatic arch in the skull and the big flange that sticks up, the chorioid process, then boy, you're not in it. That you could easily be able to tell at the very least things that are more reptile and dinosaur branch, simply because you can look at those jaw structures. The postcranial will be much more complicated to deal with. The other thing is teeth, because you find mammals having their differential teeth, so that they've got molars and canines and all of that, although you do have some things that function a little bit like that. But most of if you look at a dinosaur skull, they got a lot of the same format of teeth. There'll be a lot of them, but it's basically the same unit. And all of that's in the dentary bone. What's interesting is that all vertebrates, except for mammals, have the same jaw layout. They've got an articular quadrate jaw hinge, and then there's a bunch of bones where the dentary bone, the actual tooth bone, is not the one that's the jaw hinge. It's attached to these other ones where the articular quadrate. The quadrate is the bone up in the skull, and the articular bone is the one at the far end that's the actual jaw hinge. We're the only oddballs in the group. We don't have that arrangement. We alone have a dentary squamosal, where the dentary bone is the only bone in the jaw, and it is attached to the squamosal bone, which is up in the skull. And what happened to the articular quadrate? Well, we didn't lose it. It's up in our middle ear, and we can trace that. We know this. It's not an opinion. It's been known since the 1830s that it starts out, mammals all start out looking like the embryos of standard of reptile mode, and then they turn into that as the dentary bone expands and reconfigures to become the dentary squamosal attachment. Then, of course, in the late 19th century, they found these fossils with this oddly mammal-like jaw structure with these large dentary bones that they thought maybe that's the group that the reptiles turned into mammals from. And that is the synapsids and the therapsids that lead us into eventually predicting that there had to be a double jaw form to be able to have the transition, and that's what was successfully shown with these transitional forms. Well, boy, that's astonishing, because unlike, say, birds and dinosaurs, where birds are remarkably dinosaurian, there's so little variation between a theropod and an Archaeopteryx that it's just fine-tuning to look at the slight variations. You get basically birds are feathered flying dinosaurs, and that's pretty much what it is. Mammals had to go through this weird change to get to the jaw layout that we know. And once you recognize that you either think the designer went out of their way to make all of this shit to look like evolution, or it's just evolution and live with it.
He gets into some real fascinating stuff with the scapula and how it was part of the fish skull.
Yeah.
And then slowly become jointed, and how these different joints develop. But it's really fascinating to look at the humerus and the homologs of the humerus, radius, and ulna in these fishes, these fish fossils.
And it's not just the bones; it's the genes for the bones.
Right, the genes are very important too.
Every single one of those pieces, every bone structure, every shift of the development of tetrapod limbs and all these other things has a huge technical literature, which almost all of it's ignored by anti-evolutionists, going into the developmental biology and the genetics of how those shifts have taken place. And when you start looking at it at that level, you're right back to that fact, is you're looking at microevolutionary variations, changes in regulatory sequences, not new genes, bone morphological proteins, sonic hedgehog, the same genes are showing up as a standard substrate. It's the regulation of those genes that have modified. Like the tetrapod of hand, of 5 digits that we're used to. We didn't start out that way. There were 6, 7, 8 digits on those very early tetrapods, but eventually it winnowed down to 5, because when you start maneuvering around on land, those extra digits get in the way. And so that's apparently a selection pressure for a tetrapodal limb with 5 digits, pedidactyl, becomes kind of a standard mode. Well, that can vary slightly, and you can gain or lose digits, and that is ridiculously simple. It involves alanine repeats in the HOX13 gene.
And then Nephilim Free posted a paper that was supposed to be some slam dunk creationist evidence against the development of digits, right? And it was about the paddlefish. And it turned out that the paper, they found out that the paddlefish has some very early remnants of our digits, and the wrist bones, which are not present in these early fossils. It was an add-on. They like, some people naively think that the spines of the fish fin turned into fingers, but that's not what happened. This was an entirely new development. But then they found out that the paddlefish is still, because they had not studied it before, they recently, like in the last 10 years, they found that the paddlefish had a really good forensic evidence for the development of those wrist bones and digits, which is really cool. And so Nephilim actually turned me onto that paper, and that's one good reason to listen to the creationists, because they tell us so much about evolution.
Extra stuff. There will be examples of things where they're stumbling onto technical literature that they don't understand, and that actually is way more interesting than they actually deal with it.
Right.
I'm reminded, thinking of Nephilim reminded me of what Carl Sagan once said about Eric von Daniken. That he said that Eric von Daniken attributes everything he doesn't understand to ancient astronauts. And since he understands practically nothing, he attributes everything to ancient astronauts. And Nephi is in exactly the same boat. He stumbles onto these fields, and he's so confident. He's so smugly self-assured, and yet the papers are really interesting. I would recommend reading them whenever he brings up an actual technical literature, which he doesn't often do. He's often too far away from the field. And the same thing for all the stuff you see at ICR and AIG and that you can, if they're going to all the trouble of bringing up a technical paper, that this is a problem for evolution, read the paper. It's probably not.
You know, RJ, since you've been so involved with this field for so long, I'm kind of wondering, what do you think these creationists are looking for when they're actually, kind of coming across these papers and, I won't say reading them, but reading them?
Well, the vast majority of them are trawling for authority quotes. This is a behavior, and I know this personally because in my ancient days before I learned sound method, I was doing exactly that. Nobody taught me how to do that. It was a natural thing to go, ooh, look at that title of the thing, or somebody mentions a particular blip down in the bit. So if you start understanding the creationist mindset, you can anticipate stuff that's going to get riffed on in the creationist literature. For example, if a paper has a title, Difficulties in Vertebrate Paleontology and Phylogeny, or Resolving Difficulties, anything like that where there's mentioning the difficulty word, their brain homes in on that, and they'll latch on to that, often without bothering to read the actual paper. It's even worse if they read the account of it in Science Daily or something like that, where often they go for clickbait titles that are overblown and they're playing up, the controversy, new paper upends, blah, blah. And they'll riff off that secondary account, but not read the fine print, and they won't read the original paper. That phenomenon, that behavior is easily 95% of all anti-evolutionists.
Sometimes they're looking for some specific words like machinery, or looking for some kind of factory, or scripts.
I will go along that when I'm looking through, I check PNAS and Science and Nature every week. That's part of my ongoing research. I don't check every technical journal because there are thousands of them. Nobody has time to do that. But I do check those top 3 every week. And every once in a while, I will hit a paper where it's got a title that I go, if a creationist doesn't riff off of this, they're asleep. Even though it's not going to help their case, it's got a title that just screams they're going to flip off of it. They'll be more likely to be dealing with any fossil information which is potentially upsetting to the paradigm. So when you find transitional forms or things that are thought of as connecting up branches in hominid evolution, because remember, they're obsessed with human evolution. Those are some of the things that really get them. And other
I mean,
areas, you'll find that they're not really concerned about arthropods, invertebrates. They're not going all oogly boogly over chinorynchs. So there's obsessions that they have that are focuses in their apologetics, and others that aren't. And then, of course, when they're talking systematics, you all have heard it. Well, there's dogs, and there's cats, and there's cows, and they're all in the barnyard household pet category, and you're not having them discuss myosids with the origin of carnivoria. You're not talking about therapsids and all of that. So the behavior starts becoming very rote as to the kind of topics they home in on and the ones they don't. And so it becomes a meta game that you can peek over their shoulder from a methods point of view to see what it is they bring up, what it is they ignore, how close are they to the data field, how diligent are they. If you look at people like Nephilim, he's operating at a very superficial level where it's rare for him to offer a direct technical source. If you look at Standing for Truth, he's just as much of a parasite as Nephilim is, but he's a diligent one, where he's diligently copying all the references he copies from Jensen and Sanford and all the rest. So there's a slightly different behavior from that point of view.
Hey, Mike, tell him how Nephilim was, or who was that was believing that all of the scientists very soon will give up evolution, and all of the scientists
Nephilim.
Yeah.
Oh, and not just him. Philip Johnson and the Intelligent Design Movement, if you read their apologetics in the late 20th century, in the 1980s and 90s, they were, the Wedge document in particular, that was worked out, I think, in the middle 1990s, was thinking their 5 or 10 year agenda that they were going to demolish Darwinism and this materialism, and there's going to be this big resurgence back to God, and it's all going to be really plain and simple. Well, we're 25 years down the road, and that boat has not sailed.
But take a look at Standing for Truth's channel lately, and all of the PhD talking heads that have come over and give talks on his channel. Those guys have found a connection. And you mark my words, this little brain trust group that we're making fun of, they're going to keep being that wedge. And they are...
Absolutely. Remember, they're fighting a giant, important culture camp battle for the hearts and minds of people. That this is God versus Satan. That evolution is a lie that is fomented by Satan, and all of this materialism. And now connecting up, there'll be Tony Perkins is going to be retooling. Now that Trump is leaving office, he'll retool back to his Biden evil, Obama was evil, all of this stuff that happened. And this is what's going to be happening here. And make no mistake about it. They've got platforms. They can have, although Standing for Truth is finding it difficult to get on some platforms and that now. And the only way that you can deal with it is a variety of approaches, but to always make sure that you have sound methods, that you have your facts straight, that you recognize source methods questions so that you know how to ask them questions to force them to think about things they don't want to think about, and monitor where their behavior is going. Find out who's connected to whom. They self-identify. People are putting comments up on these things, so you can gradually build up a data field of the people who are bringing up stuff, who are the ones that are the most popular ones that are appearing versus ones that appear rarely, and link up to see who's doing websites, who's inspired to make a separate website. If most of it's going to be terribly repetitive. There's going to be an awful lot of parasitism. That's how the system runs. But it's the same dynamic that you see in the political realm. You could have seen it in the operation of the abortion groups and in climate science denialism and anti-vaxxers. They've got slightly different demographics for all of those, but it's the same mechanism. And activists like us have got to keep our eyeballs on them.
Yeah. I like to keep an eye on Royal Society as well. They have some good theme issues, and
and they've got several different journals, because you've got both the transactions and the proceedings and the biology letters, and you've got a bunch of journals in there. Needless to say, there's so much there that even just checking to see what's the current stuff, I have to admit that I haven't done that. But if we get a team that's specialized to where there's, say, one person who says, oh, I've seen this, and therefore they can be flagging really neat, relevant papers and putting them in the network on Twitter and social media and others, and that allows the stuff to be done. I do the same thing with the scientists that I follow on Twitter. There's a bunch of cutting edge scientists that are on there that they will be calling attention to the latest work. And that saves me the trouble. Wow, I find out about that brand new paper in some obscure journal on paleoanthropology that I wouldn't have found out about otherwise, because they're giving the flags up and heads up for me. And the more we have a network that does that, that way nobody needs to be the hyper polymath, because it's not possible to do that. There's not enough time in the day to do that.
Yeah.
So by having various people's, Dimiter, it has his fingers on the origins of life issue. We've got Colton with the geology. We have some generalists like you and I. You're probably more focused on the genetic information, frankly, Mike, than I am.
And molecular biology.
Yeah, and so everybody can do their own little focal points, but share it with people in the medium like this, and do it in a convenient and effective way. Make sure that if any technical literature is brought up, put the links to it if it's open access in the video description. That's the thing that I've been doing on my evolution hour each week, is that I may allude to various things along the way, but the main core stuff always is open access. And so I put the links up to that and encourage people. Now you can follow up on your own. You can look it up on your own and investigate. And so if we can make a huge network of people who collectively are so well versed in so many areas that creationists can't hide anywhere, that there's nowhere they can go that one of us won't be there to drop an anvil on them. Yeah. That's the mechanism that I want to see in place.
Here's another little directory I have for my email. I get everything from the Institute for Creation, David Rives Ministries, Creation.com, Ken Ham. Most of this stuff is begging for money, which is the real disturbing part. These guys are getting funded.
There was a young Earth creationist, he has a different email, and I realized who it was. I've forgotten his last name. Anyway, he not only emailed me asking for contributions, is one of those little creation museum things, the paleo a bunch.
Dark.
And he not only was emailing, plugging, asking for a donation, and that I reminded him that you clearly don't know me very well to realize I'm not a good mark. He then asked again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Clearly, there's a lot of robots going on there, to where they're not really human beings paying attention to the actual stuff. They're just looking around for things, just like I would be getting messages from Donald Trump urging me as a Republican to give money to his campaign. And I go, this is not, you're in a delusional world.
Wrong tree. Yeah. The interesting thing about a lot of these, when they have these donation requests, they have tiers that start at $20 and quickly go up to $5,000.
Yeah.
And it's like, what the? I mean, I want one of those. So people donate to my channel.
Remember, whenever I think how happy I am for all the people who have been able to help my Patreon account, and then my little trickle of book royalties that comes in every month. It's helpful. And my little royalty check off to Jackson for his share of the stuff. I think back that Ken Ham pulls down about $200,000 a year at Answers in Genesis.
Yeah. Yep.
And Steve Meyer at the Discovery Institute gets about $150,000.
I wonder what Jensen gets.
I'd love to know what they get. Yeah, this would be. There's been very little reportage on this, and they're not exactly forthcoming to explain how much and where they get their various resources.
Wait a minute. If they're nonprofit, don't they have to publish that stuff?
For some of the, I don't. The organizations would, but the individuals that may be getting stuff from that, that would be personal income tax.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
So they probably might not be
identifiable. Here I have to point a few.
Steve Meyer makes more money at the Discovery Institute than he did as an associate professor at Whitworth.
Yeah. Dimiter, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. So I have to say something about this. I mean, this is an absolutely fabulous area for any investigation of media or journalists investigation, the funding of Discovery Institute.
Right. That would be.
And that is amazing.
I know a journalist.
This is a very seductive. I mean, I if I'm out of job as a molecular biologist and I'm completely without scientific conscience, that is that is the actual way to go. Just go in Discovery Institute and you'll enjoy your life forever.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys are amazing there.
I thought about
will
it.
pretend that the various ones that are involved in that are true believers. I don't really have any doubt that they are not really committed, because I bumped into Douglas Axe and Jonathan Wells.
I know Axe isn't.
I think he's a true believer.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't know.
The same thing with Ann Gager and that. No, these are people that now they have vacuous Tortucan minds.
Yeah.
That they don't think about certain things they don't want to think about, but they're I believe absolutely true. But and I'm such a forgiving soul, you know. I think Ken Ham is a true believer. I don't think he certainly rakes in money on it. And Ray Comfort, these are all people who believe the things they say, and they also make money at it. So they have a dual incentive. This is a long tradition of that. Their method is so poor. These ones that are just the lower level echelon, they don't really bother about the technical.
There's something I have to discuss here about Discovery Institute. I mean, think about something else from another angle. Discovery Institute actually is doing perfectly the job, whatever they ask for. So this is a kind of a huge loop of going from, it's all about money, actually. So think about that. A huge, enormous organization, those kinds of evangelist Protestant organizations, which are interconnected with the pastors and believers and donations and money. So can you imagine just for a second how many millions or billions dollars is floating in this business of those?
The whole religious community is enormous. The Discovery Institute, the information as to how much they get income is a publicly available thing because they're a nonprofit. They're relatively small players compared to Answers in Genesis. And they're a niche group because, of course, they aren't committed to young earth creationism, although they've got several young earth creationists in their bunch. Paul Nelson, John Mark Reynolds, and others are in that orbit. But they're a very small cadre. There's only about a dozen core fact claimants in the entire intelligent design movement, and they're all the ones you see posting at Evolution News.
Yeah, my point was that they're important branch from their structure. So someone have scientifically like to just sounds like a science to give them back some kind of confidence for the Bible, right? For the alphabetical understanding of the Bible, and it's feeding into the entire system. So. And there's something else. I don't think these guys from Discovery Institute ever interested in what actual science is all about and what anyone else is thinking about that. They don't care who is thinking for what. They just care to put always a sound like structures for the believers.
Well, it is a lot of preaching to the converted. I'll give you that. But the same thing is true for Answers in Genesis. That they've made no headway whatsoever in persuading people outside of the field. Nobody is citing them. Nobody is really building off of any of their concepts. But that's in part because they don't have any concepts. The Discovery Institute design model has never gotten anywhere. Bill Dembski is a perfectly fine example of this. He's gone through his entire career as a pundit without ever applying any of his models to any genetics ever. And yet he's insisting that there's this complex specified information on there, but he never applies it to anything. And now he's functionally gone just to religious apologetics in the last few years. And so all of that was a big show that never showed up. I give it at least to Axe and Gager. They've actually done some little technical work at the Biocomplexity Journal, which is the one and only intelligent design journal that's knocking around. There have been previous ones, and they've all fizzled out over time. This is the one that's still functioning. It looks like PLOS biology in terms of its visuals. But nobody is taking it seriously either. They they're not nearly as prolific as Answers in Genesis. They're a smaller number of people, and they don't publish all that much. I've been waiting, for example, to see if anybody's heard of anything that's come from Sternberg. Sternberg is one of those that's been insisting the whale evolution is impossible, and he's done some videos on the thing that gets passed around. But I've been waiting for like a paper at Biocomplexity on this, and is yet to materialize. So if anybody has heard of anything on that front, Axe and Gager are both very affable. Somebody who is a little out of their normal venue is Michael Denton, because Denton, unlike all the others, is not religious. He's an agnostic. And when he's there, John West hovers around him, and to make sure that if he starts veering off about criticisms of religion, he'll weigh in to veer the subject back onto intelligent design. Yeah, and that's really weird. But all the rest of them, you have Jonathan Wells, who's a Mooney Unification Church minister. You've got a range of ones. Klinghoffer is Jewish. He's not a fact claimant, but he's one of their big apologists. Most of them fall into the Protestant realm, although there are a bunch of Catholics knocking around. Michael Behe is Roman Catholic, and that connects up people like Rick Santorum and others in politics that are Catholics. So it's a very ecumenical bunch compared to your younger creationists who are really conservative Protestants, almost exclusively.
Yeah. Okay. That is interesting. If someone, if you know some source for like a journalist or some kind of investigation, media investigation, just point it. I mean, I will be happy to.
Because I bump into a little bit of it. There have been occasional people who have looked into the finances at AIG and the finances at Discovery Institute. And this has been years ago, which is where those numbers came from for that, the tax records and things as to how much money they were raking in. We do know publicly that the Answers in Genesis, I think their budget runs something like 30, 40, 50 million a year. I mean, it's a ton of money. Yeah. And of course, they had enough scratch to be able to build the Creation Museum and then finally the Ark Encounter. Not only that, look at Institute for Creation Research. I get free every month the paper version of their Acts and Facts magazine.
Yeah, I do too.
It's a very glossy magazine. How much money do they have to throw around that they can afford to give that to people like us?
It is very glossy. You can't use that for toilet paper, I found out.
Yeah, the visuals are great in there. It's very all of it, by the way, available online too. You can download the thing.
Oh
so
my
goodness. In
goodness.
fact, that's the one advantage we have now, that with very few exceptions, almost all of the creationist literature is open access somewhere. The only ones that are hard to find are some of the older creation science journal stuff and the Creation Science Quarterly thing, that some of that's behind a paywall, although there are ways to sneak around it to get the information even with that.
Yeah. Okay, guys, it's getting a little late, but it's interesting. I pissed Salvador off the other day, Cordova, and I lost 2 subs. And then I pissed, I went up 2 subs, so somebody subscribed to me. And then I pissed off Otangelo, and I lost 2 subs. Every time I piss off a creationist, my count goes down by exactly 2.
Oh, that's suspicious. That's a scientific investigation.
There's an investigation that we need to do.
It's a pattern. It's a specific code here.
Imperative if and when creationism ever actually has a snowball's chance in hell of persuading any scientists. But since that doesn't, we can really take our time at this.
Yep. Okay, guys, so should we wrap it up?
Yeah. I'm glad I could be not roboting.
Oh, this is great, RJ. This is great. This is we've got to figure this out.
With all of you guys, and the same thing with the gals. Erica is just a delight when I can interact with her. There's so many neat people knocking around that we want to kick butt, take names, and make life as miserable for creationists as possible.
And don't forget to educate.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Okay, goodbye, cruel world. We're gonna go unlive. Ending broadcast. I don't have a whole lot of fanfare when I end broadcast, so anyway.
It's like saying goodbye to your mother on the phone. It's just kind of hard to get off the line.
Yeah, no, just fuck you.
Cut it off.
Go away.
I haven't said a word, and I'm going to have to say goodbye. Huh?
Yeah, oh God, you didn't get to say a word, Top Dog. So,
Well, I hope to contribute something of relevance for the history stuff.
Oh, it was great, RJ. I just listened.
yeah, that was good.
We're still live.
I've been at this decades.
Oh, we're still live? What the hell? When did it end? We did.